Welcome to Mr. Podcast with your host, Claude.
And Justin.
And Jen.
What?
We have our special guest, Jen, here with us talking about the new movie, Dear White People, which is apropos because we have two white people here and a black person. So that's all we need to talk about the movie.
That's what it took to get me back as a guest again, is to have a movie that was directed at me, addressed at me,
to help avert the impending race wars, right?
Yes. This podcast is about togetherness.
Yeah. So this is Justin Simien, the writer-director, a friend of mine's first movie. A pretty awesome first movie that I've seen from anybody in a really long time. You know, it always reminds me of when, like, Juno came out, and everyone's like, oh, Diablo Cody, and I watch it, and I go, yeah, whatever. You know, that kind of hype of the overnight success that Hollywood wants to talk about, or the it person of the whatever, is usually doesn't measure up, but I think this measures up. This is a pretty strong vision.
More so than Juno, that's for sure. Yeah,
take that up, though.
No offense to Juno, but fuck Juno.
Wow.
Go hit that baby and shut up about it.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
No one cares.
No one cares. So yeah, let's get into it. I think, if you haven't seen Dear White People, I'd say go check it out. DearWhitePeopleTheMovie.com, I believe, is their website. And, the trailers online and everything. But let's dive into it. So I've seen the movie twice. I kind of remember most of what's happening. You guys just saw it last week.
Yep.
So yeah, let's open it up. What did you think?
Who's starting?
I'm being looked at.
Yeah.
So I will say that, setting aside the question of the first movie, because as a first movie it was absolutely extraordinary. Just in terms of a movie considered in its own merit, I thought that it was incredibly thoughtful and thought-provoking, and it really demanded that the audience pay close attention, which was really refreshing, and really seriously question things about identity, character's identity, one's own identity, how all these pieces fit together. I will say that I very much appreciated and enjoyed the movie. I, however, felt all in all like the film was kind of 3 or 4 movies crammed into one, and that really speaks to the hunger and the lack of films that address these issues, and also the lack of films that address identity issues in responsible and thought-provoking ways that are respectful to the audience in general. So anyway, I very much enjoyed it. I really do want to go see it again to I don't know, revisit these questions and air it out a little bit. But I really look forward to seeing what Justin Simien's going to do in the future. This is a really exceptional start.
Yeah, I'm kind of pissed that it's so good. As an aspiring filmmaker myself, I wish people would set the bar lower. But
right.
That's not really good for anybody, but I just, that's just my own wish.
Well, the rest of Hollywood is setting a really low bar for you.
You're right. I did just see Vampire Academy, so I guess
I was gonna say
the bar pretty low.
It beats, what was that line?
Don't spoil it.
Yeah, don't spoil the worst line.
Oh, okay. All right.
Vampire Academy.
Okay.
But, Jen, I would agree with you that there's a lot packed into the movie, and I think that also speaks to kind of, your point about the dearth of movies that deal with these issues, but also that it didn't, to me, feel, disjointed because there was so much packed in there, which I think is another kind of, skillful quality of the film.
Yeah. I will say it didn't feel disjointed, but it did feel short. And it definitely left me wanting to explore these characters' lives more.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that more during the main part of the podcast, just because the identity issues that the different characters are dealing with are so complicated and so interesting, that there are a lot of generative questions to be posed there that I would have liked to have more on.
Yeah, for sure.
So, anyway.
What'd you think, Justin?
Well, yeah, I thought that it was very interesting. I mean, I don't go to the theater to see movies very often.
The theater?
The theater. No. I mostly go to opera and ballet.
The highest form of art.
Yeah, no, I really, it's been a while since the last time I saw a movie in the theater, and, you know, this is the kind of thing that I think it's worth going for. Like, this is why I would go to a movie in general. I mean, it's an interesting experience. It's really a movie that's pitched right in my sort of I don't know what's the word, like zone of interest. I'm not sure what to call it, but like it's about several characters whose lives are like intersecting in various ways.
Can I just tell you, Robert Altman was a huge influence on Justin for this movie.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, I could tell he's referenced in the movie, and you can see it really clearly. I think so. That's just something I enjoy. You know, before you show me anything else. But I think the arcs of all the characters were quite interesting, and the way they contrasted and bounced off each other was handled really well. It was a very ambitious movie. I mean, yeah, especially for a first movie. I mean, I think typically I think of first movies as being more like you know, small in scope, I guess.
Yeah.
And this movie really tried to do a lot with the characters, and I think, yeah, I mean, if I had to, I don't know, if I had to criticize it, I would say that it's, you know, I was reading a lot of interviews with him to try to like understand like where this movie was coming from and what some other, you know, influences and movies he watched, because it definitely reminded me of other movies, including definitely Robert Altman. And he mentioned in one interview that there was a 200 plus page version of this at some point. And I can definitely see that, because, you know, the typical Robert Altman ensemble movie is 3 hours. You know, this clocks in at about an hour 40, I think. And so I did kind of wish to have more time with each character to give more detail to their arcs, because they have such big arcs, you know, some of the characters, and some of those beats I felt like are a bit rushed, and I just wish it could have developed, because the movie has a very slow, methodical pace, and yet there are certain turns that just fly by, and I wanted that part to, I guess, flow a little more. So I think that like there was a few story points that I was still a little bit unclear on, or I felt like should have been emphasized more or something. I mean, that's sort of the problem I had with the movie. But honestly, it was you know, I mean, yeah, I can't make a better movie than that.
Well, I think it's a testament to the film that I could imagine watching sort of a spin-off movie from this for each of the main characters. Because there's just so, I mean, and again, this goes to the fact of the lack of films exploring Black identity and, whether Black identity actually even means anything, like the intersectionality of identity in the real world and in the real lives of people, as opposed to the sort of flattened out ways that it is sometimes addressed in films. I mean, this is actually something, there are some pretty meta moments in the film where they talk about reality television, or they talk about films and how they treat / exploit this concept of Black identity and the more marketable ideas. And they also do, there's a lot of conversation about between characters about how quote unquote Black people themselves like embody this space of enacting different stereotypes for different purposes, for different ends, and struggling with sort of the, you have your own internalized identity, and then you have the identity that's constructed by people looking at you and projecting their own ideas on you. So it's I mean, there's just a lot there.
Yeah. Yeah, Justin has talked about wanting to ideally continuing these characters in a TV show, which I think is the perfect place to really see where these characters would get to. One of the things I really like is, even though the characters some characters change more than others, or find a version of themselves that's different from how they started out. But what I really like is just the realism of the movie takes place in a short amount of time, and these kids are still in college. They're still figuring things out. No one has all the answers by the end of the movie, and they shouldn't, because who in their 20s has figured anything out? Why should they in a movie? So I really like that was kind of where we end up with the characters is, some a better sense of self, or at least an idea of who they might want to be, but not really having everything figured out. And that's why a TV show, I think, would be a great medium for telling these stories over a longer period of time, and seeing what would happen to these characters with in a lot of more varied circumstances and situations. But yeah, just my own two thoughts about the movie. I really enjoyed it. Like I said before, it is really interesting to see the themes that are brought up, the ideas that are brought up, and how they're tackled. The concept of identity and like you were saying, the construct you have internally and what you battle externally is so interesting to kind of see being played out. One of the things I really like about the movie is how it looks visually, and sort of the visual motifs that were happening. And seeing a movie the second time, I noticed that in the opening sequence, when you see all the four characters, they're all shot with the actor in the middle of the frame and two lights on either side of them. And you get this strong sense of, pulls, them being pulled in two directions, which is kind of the big idea of the movie. Which version of themselves or society are they going to side with as the, story progresses? And so I just thought, like, wow, even from the very beginning, this movie is telegraphing, what, so the emotional landscape of what these characters are going to go through, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, so, do you guys want to talk more about the story, or specifically, or any specific characters?
It might be helpful to give just a quick synopsis of what happens in the film.
Sure. Well, the story's about four main characters on a college campus, predominantly white, like Ivy League campus. It basically is, I guess, the first part of the movie, we see these characters as they're sort of reacting to a blackface party that happens on campus, and then we kind of flash back and see the lead up to that party, which is the bulk of the movie. The title, Dear White People, comes from a radio show that one of the main characters, Sam White, does. She plays, she's basically a sort of militant, headstrong, stubborn person who feels she has a sort of stamp on black identity and how that relates to whites, and then uses her radio show to kind of provoke and talk about those issues. One of the classic lines of the movie being, "Dear white people, the new minimum number of black friends to not seem racist has been increased to 2." Things like that. Very tongue-in-cheek. The movie's obviously a satire, so it works really well within that landscape. Then we also have Troy, whose father is dean of students, and has a lot of parental pressure to be a certain kind of person and to succeed in a certain kind of world. But he just basically, and so I think when the movie starts, he's the head of one of the houses on campus, the basically all black housing unit, and he's running he's in a race to be re-nominated head of house against Sam White, who is kind of the underdog in the race. She ends up winning and becomes head of house. We learned through the movie that there was some trickery into how that happened. So Troy is head of house. His father has these high expectations of him, but all he really wants to do is write comedy. He wants to be on the campus comedic magazine Pastiche, which is run by Kurt, who is the son of the president of the university. And another great little character choice is the president of the university and the dean, who's Troy's father, are rivals. So you get this kind of generational rivalry that's mirrored between the two fathers and the two sons.
And it might be worth pointing out at this point that the president and his son are both white.
Yes.
The dean and his son are black.
Yes. And then we have I'm spacing on his name.
Lionel?
Lionel, thank you. Yeah, we have Lionel, who is the kind of outsider in all of these different worlds. He's a black guy, he's gay, and he doesn't like labels though, so he wouldn't take that label. But he's struggling to find his identity. He gets assigned to live in the dorm where Kurt and his sort of all-white friends live and torment him. And so he is, so the kind of bulk of the driving of the story is, the conflict between, Sam White and Troy, and with, Lionel being, requested by, one of the campus, I guess the campus newspaper is interested in this story here. So Lionel is kind of being tasked to be a reporter and kind of figure out what's going on with these students, and that's kind of how his perspective comes into play. And I feel like I'm forgetting another character.
So Coco,
of course, Coco. You
Don't forget about Coco.
Yeah, see, I'm cheating because I'm looking.
Yeah, we're looking at the Wikipedia page.
Nice, good. Someone should be doing it. So yeah, then we have, of course, Coco, who is another black character who has a completely, almost diametrically opposed view of black identity to Sam White, where she's more of an opportunist, and she is trying to, her story is basically, she's trying to get her own, she's trying to get cast on a reality show. She does a web series on her own, but she's being told by the casting producer that she needs to spice up what she's doing and be more interesting. So she decides to get in the thick of this kind of controversy on campus around Sam White and the pastiche people, Kurt and his friends, and which leads basically to this big party at the end of the film where someone, it's a bit of a mystery, purposefully designed of a mystery. Someone sends out this very racist party invitation that basically says, hey, we're going to have a hip-hop party, but come dressed as your favorite black person. And that's kind of the climax of the film, where these rich white kids are basically dressed up as these black characters and people, and having this party that's kind of mocking black culture. And
very stereotyped.
Very heavily stereotypical characters and images. And you have Sam White there, who comes to investigate what's going on, and you have Coco, who's there investigating. And what I really love about kind of that the end of the movie is as a question that Coco ponders, which is basically, she basically says, why do white people inject, make their lips bigger and their asses bigger and tan their skin? They're trying to be like us. But then on the flip side, why are black women addicted to blonde Barbie doll weaves, which she's actually wearing by the end of the movie? So it's this really interesting question about, what is culture and who gets to claim it? Who gets to decide who owns what and can use what, and what does it mean if you use something that's, quote unquote, not from your culture? And is it bad to do so? One of the big things I like about the film is it just asks those questions. It doesn't really prescribe any remedies for race issues in America, which is smart to do, because you can't really just solve it in 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But it asks these questions that I think are very much worth asking.
And I think I think none of the questions that are posed in the film are simple questions, and that question is one of the stickier ones. And the fact that she's looking into the camera, and at that point, that's very close to the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And, at that point, we've seen this tension within the black community at the university between the sort of radical activist faction, which is represented by Sam White, the young woman who has the radio program, mm-hmm. and Troy, the son of the dean, who's really more about, playing the game in the traditional Ivy League kind of way, getting the right internships and all that. And so you've seen this tension start to play out, and in sticky ways. And then at the end of the film, you see this party that is shown in the very beginning of the film, and that is modeled after parties that seem to happen all the time, mm-hmm. In real life at colleges and universities in America, where people seem to think that it's funny, or I'm not sure what, entertaining to embody racist stereotypes, mm-hmm. for their own amusement. And so we're at this party, and then this young woman, Coco, who has been sort of characterized as kind of a sellout by some of the black students.
Yeah, it's just to be pointed out, she wears weaves, she wants the straight hair look, and she wears blue eye contacts, so she is, in certain ways, trying to, she's the character who's sort of trying to distance herself from her perceived blackness. She says things like, I'm not really interested in black guys, or he's, to Troy, about Troy, he's cute, ... for a black guy, so mm-hmm. there's this kind of separation that she's battling with her identity and how she wants to be perceived.
Right.
Yeah. So, sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say that then in the end, after this party has sort of exploded, and this party that, she had volunteered, she was eager to be a part of because she thought it was going to put her on the map, and help advance her chances of being part of this reality show that she wanted. She sees that this is a disaster, and that this is not what, this is beyond the pale. She does not want to be a part of this. And there she is standing with these blue contacts and this blonde wig, and she's asking herself, what why am I wearing this stuff? Why are they wearing this stuff? They wanted, and she has a line. I wish that I had the script in front of me. I wish I knew exactly what the line was, but it was, they want to be black for one night.
Yeah.
And they got to.
Yeah, they want to be like us for one night, and they got to, she's basically saying, what's wrong with that? What's wrong if they want to be black for a while? What's wrong if a black person wants to be white for a while, or in some way, or to some degree? Which, like I was saying, that's an interesting question about culture and we obviously these are things we all deal with, but, one of the other big sort of topical things that goes on is, cultural appropriations, when a white person wears a Native American headdress for a costume or just for fashion. Okay, what is that wrong? What is that to take someone's culture and history for a fashion accessory?
Right, and I think that posing the question is an interesting choice from the filmmaker, because in the context of this party, I mean, I think you see, I mean, it's one thing to go to a tanning bed or to get, a few years ago it was really popular for white women to get their hair braided in cornrows. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is appropriation, and, we could talk for hours and hours about what that means and, whether that's okay and what does it even mean to be okay. Yeah. But it's very different. I mean, the sort of party that they were having is not the same thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And then there's the power dynamic. I would argue that, a black woman wearing blue contacts and a blonde wig, that appropriation of whiteness does not have the same, I mean, I would argue, doesn't have the same effect, that it isn't the same kind of thing as the reverse.
Yeah, and this is where you get into the really, I mean, it's all sticky and tricky, but the really muckety muck of racism versus reverse racism, and what is racism versus what's prejudice and bigotry, and the line that Sam has. What's really interesting about Sam's character is she's someone who outwardly speaks these sort of defiant and very defined beliefs, but doesn't necessarily believe them internally, and that's sort of what her struggle is throughout the story. Is she is to a degree fine being the symbol for this progressive movement of blackness and sort of stemming the tide of the whiteness that they feel like is diluting their culture on campus. Part of the subplot is this randomized housing act that's going to go on, so that they can't just have one house that's all black students. They're going to the college is going to randomize the housing, which will dilute their quote unquote their culture. So that's kind of the thing that she's rallying against. So it's interesting, she's someone who's outwardly kind of spouting these beliefs, and one of the things she says is, that people will disagree with is black people can't be racist. And as she defines racism, as opposed to prejudice, is racism is a system, a construct in which one type of people benefit to the detriment of other types of people. And within that definition of racism, black people are not the beneficiaries of this system, therefore they cannot be the perpetrators of that system. And I think that goes to your point about the power dynamic is not equal. A black person with blue eyes and straight hair, or a white blonde wig or whatever, it doesn't have the same kind of impact that a white person in blackface or doing a black thing has, because I think of that system that she talks about, the structure. Who's on top of this pyramid matters when you're talking about the people involved in the system.
Right. And I would also just want to say for the record that I think that there are some things that I personally wouldn't necessarily label racist, but I would still say you shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. And I think when we talk about cultural appropriation, I think that there's a really difficult gray area of things where I'm not sure if I'm willing to say, yes, I am the authority who can say that is racist. Mm-hmm. But I would say, there are things you just shouldn't do.
Yeah, and it is a gray area. It's tricky to kind of figure that out, and especially when there's no perceived malice. Obviously with this, blackface party or whatever. I forgot what they called it, but these things that do happen in real life on campuses where there is malice, there is a tinge of superiority going on.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And just using these images, like you said, for entertainment. But then there's also the other sort of more minor cultural appropriations where, like I said, someone using a Native American headdress. There's not necessarily malice involved there. It could be a reverence for the culture. But if you don't belong to that culture, now you are posed with the question of, is this something you should do?
Right.
Which is a really, it's a really interesting way, and it's basically like, well, if you don't want to offend anybody, just don't do it altogether. But I think that's not necessarily the right solution to have in every situation.
Well, and I think that's the kind of thing that, opens people up to criticism from social conservatives who say like, oh, well, it's the PC police, which is why I think that we should have discussions about what might be wrong with certain things. Like I remember a few years ago, Urban Outfitters got into trouble because they were selling some product, some article of clothing that was like a Native American pattern, which is protected by law from, it's basically like copywritten or something. And like the question is, is some 18-year-old girl who's just buying this skirt, like, does she consider this insulting? Does she even think about it? Or does she just finds it aesthetically interesting? Yeah. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, what were you going to say?
Yeah. I was just gonna linger on, Coco a little bit because, at least for me, Coco was the most interesting character in the movie.
Yeah, I would agree. She was, Tiona Paris knocked that role out of the park, but on paper, Coco is just fascinating.
Yeah, I think, I liked the other three characters a lot, but I feel like they had, I guess she had the most ambiguity for me.
Yeah.
And, that was what made her the most interesting, whereas I feel like in the others, I had more clear sort of types and, like, there was a more clear arc for the other characters, whereas her arc was a little bit unclear to me.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen a Coco before.
Yeah, exactly.
We've seen these other characters. I don't think we've seen a Coco before.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was unique. And so like there's this sequence early on in the movie, and this is another thing like I wanted more on somehow, but where I guess she had like, so she's trying to be recruited by this reality TV show, and she's got this like YouTube series, I guess, something like this. And there's a point where she goes on and she goes and looks, and I guess Dear White People, like Sam's like radio show, has a online component, or she looked at the Facebook page. I'm not sure what it was exactly.
Yeah. I think
anyway,
she was posting her videos online too, or something like that.
Yeah, and she notices that the Dear White People thing, which is saying these very in your face, like, pronouncements about, hey, white people, like, blah, 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 do this, do that, pointing out all these messed up things that people do and stuff like that, very, like, in your face. Anyway, she notices that it's got way more views than her video does.
Yeah.
And as a response to that, she gets on and she makes a video where she goes on this like rant, and she starts it off by saying, I'm gonna get real black on y'all, or whatever. She says something like that. And she goes on this rant about how like this like white girl earlier in the movie had like asked if her hair was weaved or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's not weaved like a it's blah blah blah. Anyway, she goes on this long rant, and that video ends up getting a lot more views.
Yeah.
And I wasn't 100% sure what the movie was saying with that.
So the whole point was what the reality show casting guy or producer told Coco, which was that, you can't...
Conflict.
Yeah, conflict. That's what we need.
Conflict, but also the performance of a very white concept of blackness. Like this thing of like, I'm gonna get real black on y'all. You know, this, because it's not just the conflict.
Well, that might have been Coco's version of conflict, like, because that's kind of what Sam was doing. So maybe the idea is he was trying to borrow what Sam was doing there. But I think the idea was her video series was non-confrontational. So she decided she wanted to have more conflict and have more confrontation, and that's kind of how she starts it off by saying, you know, I'm gonna get black on you and tell you kind of the real deal and not sort of sugarcoat what's going on, you know.
Yeah, but there. No, I agree with that. But there's also a theme in the movie of people being interested in watching performances of quote unquote blackness. Mm-hmm. You see this with. They mentioned sort of the Tyler Perry franchise, mm-hmm. and you see this when Troy goes to that like poker game night at the white I guess it's like a White House, or it's
it's where all the Kurt and his pastiche magazine friends,
right? Where he and they have an overdub of Sam talking about, I forget what the word is, but an overdub of Sam talking about this label for this particular set of characteristics.
Oh, right.
Or
Oofda, something like that. Isn't that it? No?
I don't.
Am I crazy?
She did distill like the three types of black people, basically.
Right.
Oofda was one of them.
I think that was the, like, doing the jazz for white people, something like that.
Yeah, I believe that's the person. I think that was supposed to be Troy, someone who modulates.
Right.
That's what I was saying.
Right.
But determining for what environment they're in.
Yeah.
Right. So this idea that, you know, he's sitting there at this table playing cards with a group of white guys, and as opposed to the Troy who we have been seeing throughout the movie, who's basically, I mean, he doesn't talk about his black identity. He doesn't get into identity politics with Sam. He just is doing the Ivy League game, you know. But then here he is sitting at this table, and he wants to win these people over.
Yeah.
And so he starts performing this notion of blackness.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, he's going to be the black guy if that's what they're interested in him for.
Exactly. And that's what wins them over.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, yes, it is the video that Coco makes, it is about conflict, but there's also very much this theme in the film about the performance of blackness, mm-hmm. You know, in quotes.
Yeah, and that goes back to what they were talking about in reality shows of casting black people who are going to be very in your face and have conflict and not be nice and polite and quiet and chill, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's definitely that too.
But that's why I thought it was interesting because I mean, you know, as we talked about, like Coco's thing about like wearing the weave and the contacts and trying to assimilate to some extent, but the video that's popular is the one where she plays up her blackness, and not only that, Dear White People is popular. You know, it's like, what does that mean? Like, I found that to be a point I was stuck on for a long time, and I still don't fully understand what I'm supposed to take away from that. It's like, I don't know. I don't know.
So wait, rephrase what you're saying. What's the question?
Like, I don't, I mean, maybe there's not like a main point that I'm supposed to get from it, but I just thought it was curious, the idea that, you know, if she's just doing whatever she was doing before, like that wasn't catching people's attention as much as her playing up her blackness. But also, Dear White People, the online version, was very popular. Like,
yeah.
Like people want to hear this. Like, what does that mean? Like, it seems like that's almost counter to the movie. Like I'm trying to understand why they made a point that Dear White People is really popular online.
Well, to me, I think the point was the conflict. Dear White People had conflict. It's going to have people talking about it, whether you agree or disagree. People are going to chime in, and that is a main idea of our.
So it doesn't matter what they're saying. It's just it's the fact that
it's Rush Limbaugh, it's Bill O'Reilly, it's Bill Maher. I mean, it's people who say inflammatory things will get listeners and views. I think to me that's the first main idea, but then I think the second idea is what you guys were saying about her playing up her blackness as a performance and as something people want to see. And again, I think they're hand in hand, that idea of conflict and the blackness, in terms of this reality show she's going for and the reality show culture, I think is what they were really getting at, is those two things go hand in hand. These people who are playing up stereotypical notions of blackness, thereby creating conflict, are people who get cast. And that's kind of basically what she did. She could have, I think, because basically Coco could have maybe done something else that was inflammatory, but not played up her blackness, and maybe there would have been a different outcome. We don't know that, but because they didn't do that. So it was kind of played hand in hand. But I think in terms of what the story was going for with her specific journey of trying to get on this reality show, it was saying conflict is key, and that's what that guy wanted, and that's what she was trying to go after in the movie is. How do I drum up the conflict and a key to doing that presumably is to play up this notion of blackness.
Yeah. But yeah, also like the reality producer wanted to recruit Sam, and the idea, like, I just imagine like Sam being approached, especially as she is early in the movie, like, hey, do you want to be on a reality TV show to be like the angry black character? Like, like the idea that like that would be something she would want to do is just kind of ridiculous,
Well, I think if it was platform for her ideas, she would be into it. I think if you pitched it to her, you want to be the angry black character, she'd say no. But
yeah, and I think there's a throwaway line that she said no.
Yeah, she said no emphatically. But I mean, she's too smart to.
Yeah, she doesn't. Yeah.
Platform.
Yeah, she doesn't, and that's the difference between her and Coco and Sam is that sellout factor or that stardom thing that that's very pervasive in our youth culture is this idea of I just want to be famous. I don't really care how it happens. I don't care what my image ends up looking like by the end of it. I just want to be famous at all costs, and that's kind of the driving force behind Coco's character is at what price is she willing to be famous? The first step of her wanting, of the cost is she wants to increase the conflict in her web series so she can get more views. So she plays up her blackness. She talks about something she wasn't going to talk about before, and that worked, and so she keeps going down that line. Well, what else am I going to do to get to this goal of being a star? You know what I mean? And it takes her all the way to being part of Pastiche, agreeing to to sort of MC this party that everyone else would agree is in poor taste at the very least. But she's willing to do that for, to be a star, and it's not until she sees what the party really is that she, literally has to take a step back and say, okay, well, what is this? What is this really worth?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a genius line at the end that I will not spoil between her and Troy about that, where she is in terms of the search for fame.
Yeah.
But we talked a lot about Coco. I wonder if we should talk about some of the other characters.
Yeah. I wanted to linger on that because, for me, that was the most difficult part of the movie for me to figure out. And I think that's why I found it the most interesting. But I spent a lot of time trying to understand her scenes. It made me want more of them. But yeah, I think she's great. But yeah, we can definitely talk about the other characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Coco's spectacular. And again, like I said, we haven't really seen this version of Coco, or a character that's like Coco, who's willing to say these things. It's like, you shouldn't say that, you're black. You know, you shouldn't, you should be like Sam, or you should get in line like Troy, or you should hide like Lionel. But she has this alternative version of her militantness, or her steadfast ideas about what she wants and how she's going to express it and she's unapologetic about it. That's the thing is, she gets to say things that, a white person couldn't say in this movie. You wouldn't have Sophia, who is Troy's white girlfriend, who is Kurt's sister, Kurt being the son of the president. You couldn't have Sophia say, well, Troy is really attractive for a black guy. That's a completely different. I mean, maybe she could say that if they're making a point, but
she could say that, but it would mean something different.
It would mean something different. But when Coco says that, it's like, oh my god, like, what does that mean for your own identity if that's how you view him or someone like him?
But it's so interesting to see a character like that, a character who unabashedly says things like that. Because I've had girlfriends who were black who said things like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. These people exist, and
you don't see them in films.
Yeah, and what I love about Coco is she doesn't hide from the other black characters. She's in the same black dorm. She eats in the same cafeteria. Yeah, she eats with her back to Sam White, and she's not a part of Sam White's group, but she's not hiding her viewpoints and how she wants to look and how she wants to express herself. She doesn't care what other people think, and she'll tell you that to your face.
Yeah.
But let's talk about some less interesting characters. No.
Okay. Yeah. On to the boring ones. No, not really.
There's no boring characters.
No.
I was watching this thing that somebody had posted on Facebook that was a clip from, I guess Gwen Ifill had moderated some discussion about, titled After Ferguson, and there was just an excerpt of this little kid giving this absolutely incredible expression. Like, he had this amazing look on his face in response to this this defensive, ahistorical shit that this white guy was saying about.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
Yeah, and so it's the kid. The look on the kid's face is priceless. But I mean, in general, like, the discourse that's happening at that moment between the community organizer, the head of a nonprofit or whatever, and then this white guy who I don't actually remember what his title was. I don't remember why he was...
Random white guy. I have no idea.
Mr. White Guy?
Yeah.
I have no idea what he was supposed to be.
There was some reason why he had some kind of title.
He had a title.
There was some reason why
he was.
Yeah, I saw that. I think I saw. That's the only clip. I meant to go back and watch the whole thing, but I only saw that section.
Yeah. I'm sure that it's incredibly frustrating.
It's I was on some webs. Oh, there was a site. There was an article talking about. Now I'm forgetting his name, but the guy who was in a manhunt over in Massachusetts or something. Like this white guy who had killed some cops, and there's like a 48-day manhunt for him, and they just today or yesterday, Eric Frayne, I think, or something like that was his name.
Oh, I saw that name, but I didn't know what the story was.
Yeah, so it was very similar to the Dorner situation, where it was a person who was a black guy in California who killed some cops, and there was like a 12-day manhunt or something for him. And you can guess that the black guy ended up getting killed in this thing, but the white guy who did basically the same thing, ended up being apprehended with no problem and taken into custody. He did not die. And so I was on this site and reading some of the comments, and one of the things I posted, because this guy brought up, this guy was saying he was talking to a friend of his who was white, and was talking about DUIs. And how his white friend had related stories where he would be caught driving under the influence, and police officers would never write him up for it and actually just escort him home. And his black friend says, wow, that's crazy. That would never happen to me. And his white friend refused to believe that he got this treatment based on his race. So my response to this post was it must be like I have the ability to empathize and say it must, like, the guilt someone might have over saying I get a privilege that other people don't have by virtue of nothing that I've done other than being born. Like, I can see how you would want to deny that. So we get this
definitely
of like reverse racism, or there's no racism, or everybody's racist, or whatever you want to say that's really not what the truth is. And it's because you don't want to, like, so that's what this guy in this After Ferguson thing was basically. He doesn't want to admit that the world is unfair, and it's like something I can understand something in our brain wants the world to be fair, and it's cognitive dissonance when we see evidence to the contrary, and it's really it makes the situation worse when the people who are benefiting from this system want to deny they benefit from the system. That's the worst response you can have to the system.
Right. And I mean, we'll never get past it until we acknowledge that it exists. And, I don't think that, I mean, yeah, as you said, nobody wants to believe that they receive privileges, that they haven't earned. Mm-hmm. And that it comes at the expense of other people who have not unearned. They haven't done anything to lose the privilege, right? I mean, no one wants to believe that, but just not wanting to believe. So there's plenty of stuff that I don't want to believe.
Yeah.
But not wanting to believe it doesn't make it go away.
But it's funny because expand that idea out, and that is really the difference between liberals and conservatives, right? Like climate change, evolution, what happens in life and death. Like this idea of a thought that makes you nervous, and your response to it is to deny it. The brain, there's a kind of brain that will accept that, and the kind of brain that doesn't. There's a kind of brain that says, I can deal with the fact that life is unfair. I can deal with the fact that I don't know what happens after we die. I can deal with the fact, that bad things happen we have no control over. And then there's another brain that says, I can't deal with that.
But I think that there are lots of brains out there among, white liberals who, can go there on a lot of issues, but they cannot go there on race because of this defensiveness. But what they don't seem to get is that there's not necessarily an incompatibility between saying, this exists, and I do benefit from this, and, I think it's really shitty, and I don't seek to actively exploit this privilege, but I accept it, and I don't actively seek to dismantle it. And, that doesn't, I mean, nobody's saying to this guy, you're walking around in a white sheet burning crosses in people's in front of people's homes. But, you are accepting privilege.
Well, go ahead.
No, and I think that nothing will ever change until a critical mass of white people can say, look, you know what, it makes me feel sick to my stomach, but you're right, it exists. Well, because just to the thing about the DUI, there have been plenty of times because the legal limit is really low, and there have been times when I know that I've been driving above the legal limit, which is something that I would never be, not that I felt like I was not driving safely, but, I wouldn't if I had to do a breathalyzer, I probably wouldn't have passed. And that's something that I would not be comfortable doing as a black person, because just being black puts me at a higher risk of being pulled over.
Yeah.
And, this is true of so many things. I mean, I thought about this a lot when we were hunting for houses. Things that if I were a black person or a Latino person, behavior that would be labeled suspicious. Getting out and walking around a vacant property.
Yeah.
And
that's really where it's at. It's those really simple things. When you talk about privilege, it's those really, really simple things you people take for granted. And then it exists in sexism too. Like these areas where this one little mostly innocuous thing that someone can be doing is viewed completely differently based on who they are, what they look like. So yeah, so if you're going around and you're trying to inspect a property and you maybe, look to see if the windows have any damage, or you want to go check the bag. Yeah, if you're a white woman doing it versus a black guy doing it, you're going to get two different responses to what's happening there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's those kind of things that go unseen, and but that's the thing when you're talking about change. Like, change is exactly the problem, is because when you accept the notion, so say you're a white person who accepts that white privilege exists and that we live in a racist system, and if you really accept that on a fundamental level, that's a call to action. That means that you can no longer have your head in the sand. You understand the world a certain way, and it's incumbent upon you to do something about it. Not to be an activist or go full board on anything, but just your daily, now you have to think about it, right? Just like you're saying, now you have to think about it because you understand you have this different viewpoint of the world. So now when you're in a certain situation, you have your mind goes through an extra mental process and says, well, what would this be like if I was this kind of person? So it's that kind of thing that people, I think, don't want to take the first step to accept it, because there's all this other baggage that's going to come along with accepting it that's tough to just accept and say, well, now I have to change my ways, or now if I get pulled over in a DUI, I'm going to have to feel guilty if the cop doesn't write me up. You know what I mean? And why should I have to feel guilty about something that I had no control over?
Right. And never mind the fact that it'll, the consequence of the other side, the consequence of inaction is, open season on young black men in this country. Mm-hmm. And the fact that white people don't want to be made uncomfortable encourages apathy that costs people their lives. Yeah. It costs community stability. It runs so deep. Mm-hmm. Dismantling it would not be easy. It just, if everybody woke up tomorrow and was like, you know what, white privilege exists. I understand it finally. Mm-hmm. If we gave everybody, we put it in the water, understanding of what white privilege means. We would still all wake up having watched, the criminal black man on television shows and on the news. Mm-hmm. And, this is the thing we were just talking this morning and based on this After Ferguson clip, about how when those cops showed up at that Walmart, they had been told, and that was here in Ohio, that was not far from here, they had been told by, the 911 caller that this guy was waving a gun at children. Yeah. And that he was loading his gun. Yeah. And this is what they've been told. And this guy, the 911 caller, saw that, quote unquote. He did nothing. You watch the surveillance footage, he did nothing that looked like that. Yeah. But he saw that because of what he sees on TV all the time, what he sees in movies.
It's a loaded, the images of people come loaded with these stereotypes. And, obviously, as they've done tests, psychological, sociological tests, and how people perceive other people, different races, and it's tribalism at a very fundamental level. But yeah, a white guy with a toy gun in a store does not look the same to a white person as a black guy with a toy gun in a store. And how, and it goes back to what people say about eyewitness accounts and how your mind fills in blanks and makes up stuff and change the color of a car. And, so it's and this guy was just wrong. That's the other thing too, is he was just so wrong, and it cost someone their life. He basically committed a crime by reporting a false report, but
false reporting that costs this guy's life.
Not going to be held accountable for that at all. But it's it's so crazy that you see something innocuous and you go, oh my God, that's a dangerous situation, and it'd be completely different if this guy had. The gun wasn't even out of the package. He wasn't waving at anybody. He wasn't even holding it because it was still in the package. So there's ways where you could have understood that situation if it was more accurate to what he called it in. But it was so far from what he reported. And then, then when you have a militarized police force who can kill with impunity, then it just makes it all worse.
Yeah. All
So,
right. Well, I don't think we're gonna solve it.
no. But I mean, this all goes to what Dear White People is talking about.
There you go. That's a great segue.
Yeah, I mean, this is all wrapped up. I mean, the movie wasn't about that particularly, but it's the general themes are there. You know, race and identity and how people perceive you and how you want to be perceived. So you guys want to talk about Troy?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Troy, go.
So, yeah, let me think. What can I say about Troy? I think the thing about Troy that I had trouble with, I guess this is how, like, all these segments are gonna go for me. It's gonna be like, here's the thing that I had problems with understanding about this character. Because I think the things that are, like, clear, I think we've covered, or at least were covered in the summary, and, like, we can talk about that stuff, but, like, this is the stuff that I'm hung up on.
Yeah.
So like, he's got there's this subplot where, he's dating this white, woman who's like she's the sister of,
So she's the daughter of the president.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's Kurt's sister.
Daughter of the president and the sister of the guy from the fucking humor magazine or whatever. Yeah, Pastiche. Okay, it doesn't really matter that much in the movie, but it's there. Anyway, he's got this thing where, like, he goes in the bathroom and, like, I guess he pretends to take a shower, or maybe does take a shower, and then he gets out, and then, like, he smokes some weed and, like, writes jokes or something, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that...
That's what he says.
Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. So, like, and like, his father is the dean, played by Dennis Haysbert, the well-known Dennis Haysbert.
Mm-hmm. He was also on 24.
And, yeah, and many other things. And there's this whole thing about, like, he is supposed to follow in his father's footsteps. He's supposed to play the game, make the right connections. He's supposed to become a lawyer, I think. That's what he said.
Right, that's the plan.
Yeah. But what he really wants to do is, like, comedy writing, I guess?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the thing about that was, this is where I felt like more time would have helped, because it was there, it was in the movie, it was presented, it was stated, it was shown, and yet, I never quite felt it. I mean, I don't know.
You didn't buy it?
It didn't feel like they drove home the point of, like, this guy really wants to be a comedy writer. I never quite felt that, even though it's presented to me, you know?
Yeah, I think part of that is the lack of time, because there's so many characters and so many things to show. And I think part of that was Troy himself of not fully embracing and being able to show what his true passion was. I mean, what I liked about, and part of it was the structure, like, so the first time we see Troy smoking in the bathroom and writing jokes, we don't really know that we're really seeing his internal life, because it's still part of the setup of the story. So It just seems like, okay, we're just learning an extra thing about Troy. And it's not really until he's with Coco and she asks him, does he smoke? And he says no. And then it's sort of in the next, part of that scene, he ends up smoking with her when he lets his guard down, and you see, okay, well, this is kind of the real Troy, right? So I think, so that's the other part of it too, I think, is it's that sort of Troy's inner life. That's when he's the most Troy, is he just wants to get high and write jokes and be funny.
Yeah.
And as I was talking with some other friends about this movie, like, Troy's, from how the movie kind of presented itself to me, like, Troy's ideal goal to be an SNL writer. That's what he wants to do. He wants to follow in the footsteps and have fun and be, if he didn't have his dad in his life being an oppressive, authoritative figure, he would be this, maybe class clown guy who doesn't necessarily care about having the perfect image and the perfect look and doing the right things and meeting the right people and being, PC when he needs to be PC and all that stuff. He would be a comedy writer. So I think part of it was there wasn't enough time to really delve into that. But I think part of it is that Troy is so much about his image and so much about what he wants people to perceive him as that he doesn't want everyone to have that part of his life, to share that with everybody. Like, he makes it clear to the Prestige guys he wants to be on Prestige, but it's a secret really to everybody else, you know?
Right. And he says that he only wants to do it for like something on his resume. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess like the idea is that most of the time he's presenting some kind of image to the public, and so like we're just not seeing. But that was just, I guess I had a hard time processing that on top of everything else. So I think that totally makes sense. But I think that's where I was stuck with this character. Mm-hmm. But I think that makes sense. That's pretty much what was going on.
Yeah, I thought he had an interesting kind of dynamic of, because he does have somebody there keeping him in a certain position. You know, he's got his father there all the time. He's at his father's school. He's at the school with his father's lifelong rival. You know, I mean, that's a lot of pressure. You know, where the dads are playing this chess game with their sons. Using their sons as pawns in this game of who's gonna get control, and then you have Sophia be a part of that game because it's, the idea is that Troy stopped dating Sam White to date the dean's daughter, the president's daughter. You know, partially to get back at the president, partially to get in closer to Kurt so he can get on Prestige. You know, so there's a sense of opportunism there as well. You know. Troy has a lot of complex things going on, and by the end of the movie, he is perhaps the least changed of the main characters, because he has the opportunity to be the president of the school or class or whatever. He decides he still wants to be the guy who's known as this sort of perfect Troy guy. To the detriment of his relationship with Coco, who when he's with her, he's the most sort of authentic Troy. But that's not the Troy he wants people to see. And when he has that's what I was saying earlier about these characters haven't figured out everything, and the story takes place in a small amount of time, so they haven't changed as much as they ultimately could or will. So he's still beholden to this idea of his outward image and the prestige that being the class president would bring him. So he'd rather have that than have an open relationship with Coco or be more authentic Troy, which I think is an interesting thing.
Yeah, it seems like he sells out more than she does,
mm-hmm.
which is kind of strange.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's supposed to be the sellout character.
I think he's got more pressure. He's got more ingrained pressure from his dad about being this kind of person, and that doesn't change. He stands up to his dad at the end, but that's one conversation over hundreds they've had. That's not, you don't change, what is it? You don't change the course of a ship in one conversation. That's what they say, right?
Yeah, that's the well-known phrase.
Yeah, that's
well-known phrase. I think that was Shakespeare. Now doesn't. So I think, to me, the movie's realistic in the sense that he's still beholden to what his father wants. It's still mentally ingrained from him. It's indoctrination in a way. I mean, he's been trained to think a certain way by his dad. And he rails against it to a certain degree in certain times, in certain ways, but he's not completely out of his father's shadow.
Only privately, though.
Yeah, privately. Yeah,
I mean,
where he's not subject to scrutiny.
Yeah.
But I think that if he had more of a transformation in that short of a period of time, I wouldn't buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that it's really nice to see the scenes with him and Coco where, he gets to reveal a little bit about himself, to her and to the viewer. But, if in the end, they're like holding hands or whatever, because they have the line about how, the dean, his father, had kind of squashed his relationship with Sam because he didn't think it looked right.
Yeah.
And so, what is his dad going to say about him dating Coco at that point? And, obviously the pressure from his father is immense. And one thing that's really striking is you see what Troy's life is like with the pressure from his father and all the things that Troy has to do to be successful versus what Kurt does as the son of the president.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the line in where the dean says to his son, that when the president, that he and the president were students at the school at the same time, and that the president was barely skating by.
Yeah, and who's president now, and who's
exactly.
Yeah.
And you see that playing out, and so there's this way in which, Troy, it's easy to say that Troy sold out and that, he should own his relationship with Coco, he should follow his own path, but in reality,
he's still in school, he's still got things he wants to do, and he's still got ambitions, and
exactly.
One relationship in a couple weeks isn't going to change that, and I think that is very realistic to depict it that way.
Yeah, and he has to work twice as hard if he wants those things.
Yeah, that's the thing. Kurt has to do nothing, and Kurt's going to get whatever he wants, and you see that you see that just how the characters Troy and Kurt carry themselves. Kurt can leave an obscene voicemail message deriding his roommate Lionel, and nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
The dean even hears it and isn't going to do anything about it. But move Lionel around, not reprimanding Kurt. Kurt. So and again, it goes back to the idea of white privilege, where this is something that's talked about with sort of the the stereotypical white parents, letting their kids kind of run around and do whatever in a restaurant or something, and the stereotypical black parents kind of being more aggressive and keeping their kids more in line. And it's really teaching the kids how to behave themselves in culture and in public. And I've seen that so many times where I'll go to some place and I'll see young white kids jumping on furniture, hanging on this thing, being kids. Like, nothing's wrong with being a kid. We're monkeys. We want to climb on stuff, especially as a kid when you have that energy. But there's a complete different level of I'm speaking generally here, of course, completely different level of parenting when it's like, listen, I need to teach you from a young age how people are going to perceive you. And you cannot run around this restaurant and make a scene if you're a black kid. If you're a white kid, you can get away with it. And I think it's like that's what you see with Kurt and Troy. You see from just how they carry themselves. Kurt can do whatever. He takes his penis out and flashes it in the student's face. Troy could never do that. Troy carries himself in a stiffer, more guarded way. Kurt is way more outwardly. He just puts himself on everybody. You know what I mean? Like, almost like infects the room with his selfness.
Right, and his sort of sloppiness.
Yeah, and his sloppiness, because he can do that. He walks into the black dining hall and he eats there because he knows he can get away with it. And
that's a good point. Okay, because that was a question I had. Like, because they actually asked him about that, like, why is he there?
Mm-hmm.
And he comes back with just a really shitty racist joke, but like, it was a question I was wondering, like, why is he eating there?
Because
is that you think just because he
because he can, because
knows he can get away with it?
Why have a blackface party? Why, I think when you, it's the same, and again, it's the same thing, the young white kid who's going to disrupt a public situation because his parents see no need to instill in his kids and that kid a certain way to behave in public because, hey, when you're an adult and you behave that way, a cop might pull you over and kill you. So I need to train you as a kid to not be outwardly yourself. You know what I mean? When you are a Kurt and you can get away with things and provoke people with no recourse, then that's what you do. People do what they can get away with. And Kurt knows he can get away with eating wherever he wants to, no matter what. And it's different than saying, well, your cafeteria has better food, I'm going to eat there and quietly just eat my meal and be whatever. It's like, no, he's going to make a scene, and he's going to project his self over others, and of course that's a big moment in the movie where Sam stands up to him. But it is that kind of power / whiteness / maleness dominating thing that you see play out in different venues, that Kurt can be the alpha male or whatever. He can be this dominating force with impunity, whereas other people cannot, based on the systems that they're a part of.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. But that gets to another question I had about his character, Kurt, I mean. Because, and it's fine that he's, not that complex of a character. I mean, the movie's not about him. But I had trouble, because, he's sort of basically two-dimensional, and so he's playing a type. I mean, he's a bully, he's pretty much just an antagonist.
Yeah.
For everyone. But I feel like the movie, the character I see, just based on the types that I know from other stories like this, he's playing a jock type.
Mm-hmm.
And not that he looks like a jock particularly, but that's kind of the type of the jock bully character who's really popular and can do whatever they want, and, they own the school, and, everyone else is, that's basically the type of character he's playing. But on the other hand, he writes for the comedy magazine. It's just hard. It was hard for my brain to wrap my head around the bully humor magazine guy.
Yeah, but at an Ivy League school, that's the kind of person who sort of is the role of the jock.
It's all about where the power comes from in the system you're talking about, right? If you're in a small Texas football town and you're the captain of the football team, you've got a lot of power. You can do whatever you want. The coaches are going to take your back. The teachers are going to take you back. The principal's going to take your back. The students are going to love you. You know what I mean? But yeah, if you're at an Ivy League school where one of your claims to fame is half of the SNL cast comes from your writing staff, like the Harvard Lampoon, which is basically what Pastiche is, then that is a source of power for those people, so they can use that to their advantage.
I mean, it's sort of the big man on campus type more than the jock type.
Yeah, but he didn't seem funny. I mean, he didn't seem like a comedy writer.
Yeah.
He seemed like, an empty-headed jock. And so it was just weird to me, because his jokes were all horrible, and it was just
it was almost like he was only president because of who he was.
Yeah.
He didn't have to be funny to become president.
And maybe that was the point.
I think that's part of the point, and it's he chose to seat himself in that position. He could have chosen something else if he wanted to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't that I'm sure there's funnier people than him. That's not how he got
hope
the job.
so. I mean, because SNL, I mean, as bad as I think it is, it's funnier than he was.
Yeah.
It's, if we're really supposed to believe, this is a source of, serious comedy writers, and just having them be, I think I would have liked maybe a little bit of, he doesn't really do any of the, good pieces. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It was just like a stand-in for a fraternity, though. It was a closed-off system of people who only liked their kinds of people, and he was the president of that.
Yeah, but I guess I found that strange because I've never seen, a comedy publication be portrayed that way.
I mean, the Lampoon the culture around the Lampoon is like that. It's basically like a frat. They've got their
I don't really
parties,
know.
They've got their,
Sure. No, I'll buy that exists. It's just not something I've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like a well-known trope in the comedy magazine and the weird culture there, It's not something that's been covered very thoroughly.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I would say.
And actually, this reminds me of two things that are pretty unrelated to what you're talking about. And one is the fact that just all in all, I feel like this movie really expected a level of intellect from the viewers that was really, really surprising to me.
Yeah.
Most movies are just not like that. And the other thing is, it wasn't really funny. I thought from the website, because on the website there are these like PSA style shorts that end with the
the more you know
kind of thing, and they're really funny.
Yeah.
And I thought with the title of the movie, and I knew what the title referred to, this idea of this radio program that's like faux advice for white people to be less racist or whatever the satirical conceit of that is. I was expecting it to be funny. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple of funny moments, but it's actually really just dead serious.
Well, I think that's the thing about comedy is it's different people are going to laugh at different things, and I think part of the hurdle here is a lot of the concepts aren't funny on the racism isn't funny. Things that racists do can be funny. Responses to racism can be funny, but sort of the topics aren't funny. You know what I mean? So I can see that it's not packed with jokes like you. I mean, there's I saw it with two audiences. There's quite a bit of laughter, but it really depends on what you're willing to laugh at and why you're laughing at these things. I think some things you'll laugh at because it's shocking. But other people might not laugh because they're shocked, so they're not going to laugh.
Right.
Yeah.
They're taken aback, or they're thinking about it intellectually and not thinking about it as a joke. Like even something as simple as Kurt saying, well, I come to this cafeteria because it's the only place on campus I can get both chicken and waffles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a hugely racist thing to say. And it's something one person might not laugh at because they're like, oh, God, he just said a hugely racist thing. But it's also something you can laugh at. Because of how he delivers the line and what and it's a shocking thing to say, So I think it really depends on the person, like how much comedy that you might find in it. Because, like I said, I think the topics are very unfunny on the surface, and it's really it's so individualistic because it's not like a broad comedy where somebody slips on the banana peel and 95% of people are going to laugh at that because
that's what I was expecting.
You were looking for the banana peel. That's the sequel, Dear Banana Peel.
Yeah, why did he cut the banana peel scene?
Yeah, I know, right? Well, that's in the sequel, Dear Banana Peel.
Maybe they can have some reduxed version of Who's on First.
Yeah. No, but I think
the white person's on first. We already know that.
Oh, incisive. It hurts.
Yeah, we saw it. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that we saw it in a very empty theater with.
Yeah, but it's worth saying that it was Sunday night.
Yeah, the crowd matters too. Like any kind of group thing like that, the crowd is willing to laugh to the degree other people, you can feel the mood and what kind of, people give other people permission to behave certain ways in those situations. Mm-hmm. So if you have somebody laughing at the beginning about certain things, that lightens the mood, and then people are going to be laughing, so let's laugh along. Versus if people are more serious, then But I totally take your point, like that it's not just on its surface a lot of just flatly comedic jokes and ideas.
Right. I mean, I wasn't exactly expecting like black people be like, and white people be like, it wasn't that kind of humor that I was expecting. Yeah. But I was expecting it to be but I mean, it is true. It's like, yeah. I don't know. I feel like one person maybe laughed at one of the lines that made me the most uncomfortable in the movie early on.
Oh, yeah.
Troy and his white girlfriend when he comes out from smoking weed in the shower, and his girlfriend's like, fuck me with your big black cock. Mm-hmm. And for like a split second, Troy gets this look on his face because at that point you sort of think that Troy is one of these people who's not interested in talking about race. He's not interested in asking the questions that Sam is asking. He just wants to be a high achiever. Yeah. He just wants to be the best. He doesn't care about all the racial politics. Yeah. But there's like this flash across his face of like, oh God.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't laugh at that line, but I think like
most people laugh at that line.
There was a laugh. There was a laugh.
People laugh at that line. Laughter is about surprising, and it's a surprising thing to say, and it's shocking. And it's a ridiculous thing to say. But that's, again, that a lot of the jokes come from a very real place where if you read that, you might not laugh. because you're thinking about it intellectually and you're saying, wow, Troy is now confronted with his own race and the situation that he didn't expect to in a way. He's being objectified by his race now, in a situation he didn't expect to for the very same reason you're talking about, that he actively avoids that. But here's a situation where it's unavoidable, and it's this also mixed with exploitation of, this is what she's getting out of it. She's getting to, and it's that trope of, I don't think it's a joke in this movie, but there's a joke out there, for white women, if you want to upset your parents, date a black guy. It's that joke.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in general, like, the tone of the movie is less comedic than I was expecting based on those PSAs. Like, it is like a heightened reality. Like, it's not played like gritty drama,
Yeah.
But it's also not like, well, like you said, I mean, obviously it's not like The Naked Gun or something. I mean, it's somewhere between those two, and it's like, it's more, I don't know, it's more like dry satire than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Like, not really just a lot of laugh out loud, like, one-liners.
Yeah, for sure.
That's not really where the humor is. And there's a lot more, like you said, like, thought-provoking moments that, could be viewed as, like, comedic, but also could make you think about things, and, it's hard to, like, think and laugh at the same time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have a hard time, personally. I don't know.
You laugh or you think. To try to do it at the same time is tough.
It's too much. It's just too much.
Because laughter is a reaction, yeah.
Yeah, it's a full, laughter encompasses your brain, I think. That's why it's, like, nice to do, but it's hard to, like, have an intellectual sort of thought while you're laughing at stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I laughed less than I was expecting, but I actually was pleasantly surprised by the tone of the movie, and also, like, the seriousness of it. Like, I thought it was going to be lighter than it was.
Yeah.
And it was actually, like, quite serious about the topics it's addressing. Even though it does address them with a light touch, it's still not in any way, like, pretending like they're not serious.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, again, a credit to the director and the writing, like, to walk that line of, it's not too serious, it's not too light.
Yeah.
That's a tough line to walk.
Definitely.
For a topic as loaded as identity and racism.
Yeah.
Identity and race, yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, and I love where all these four characters, the quadrant of these characters, the space they take up within the themes of the movie, and they're all very, very different and have completely different approaches. But you can kind of group them together based on different things. Coco and Sam are similar in how strongly they hold on to their beliefs. They have different beliefs, but they 100% believe in them until they don't. And then you have Lionel and Troy, who are almost the characters who are hiding or running away from or non-confrontational in their beliefs, and have to make their beliefs come to the forefront of their actions because of what's going on around them. I think Lionel and Troy would have been very happy to continue on how they started if it wasn't for Sam and Coco.
Yeah.
And what, the kind of problems that they create for the story. So it's interesting to see where they occupy different spaces, but there's, Venn diagrams of these characters where they overlap in certain ways and certain kind of approaches. And I really love Troy and they didn't have a lot of time together, but Troy and Lionel, they become roommates, and he sees, Troy is watching Star Trek, and again, Troy being in his private time, doing something he would not tell other people he does, being a sci-fi nerd, and that little moment of Lionel, like, oh, you're like me, and later Troy tells Lionel, like, hey, if we went to high school together, I would have had your back, you know what I mean? And it's like that kind of, that that idea encapsulated in that one sentence, that whole thing of like, especially about high school, and then of course with college, but like, and then the rest of our lives, where we're so sort of isolated from people, and we view people with all these, you know, preconceived notions and stuff that we don't know how we connect, and we almost try not to connect because connecting is hard, and there's rejection involved, and there's, you know, image, you know, and it's just like in high school, you know, you decide who you want your friends to be based on how you want people to see you. You know, if somebody is the outcast in school, you're less likely to go befriend them. Just by the nature of the sort of dog-eat-dog world of high school and the social structure there. And so that whole idea of like, if we take those artifices away, Troy and Elena would have been great friends. You know, but because all that stuff is built on top of them, that kind of separates them until they can like have that moment and connect and say, oh, guess what? Here's something we have in common. Here's a place we can start to understand each other. I mean, and that idea is literally the cure for fucking everything that's wrong with our world, is where's the one place we can start to understand each other and then build from there, you know? So it was really cool to kind of see that just play out in very something simple of like, here's a mutual interest that they have that they wouldn't have both thought that they had.
You know, I think that's a really good point, and that Lionel's character is a good illustration of how this movie is about identity in really non-simplistic ways, because he's sort of the reject, but not it's sort of like a self-imposed exile, as well as a rejection. I mean, you mentioned earlier that Kurt leaves this sexually intimidating or threatening sort of. So he's a gay character, and that, you know, Kurt and some other character also in the very beginning of the movie. Sort of make these vaguely threatening, but also just really repugnant attacks on him based on his sexuality. But he doesn't feel that he can go to the black house on campus because he, as a gay black college student, he feels that he would not be welcomed in the black house. He doesn't participate in the black student union, you know, and he sort of doesn't want to expose himself to that, even though avoiding that potential risk that he sees keeps landing him in these other intimidating situations where he's pushed to the outskirts and he's harassed in these different ways. And then when he finally does end up in the you know, historically black house, he's like immediately surrounded by sort of the more activist clique within the house. And they're saying, like, you know, they immediately confront him about the fact that he's been avoiding them. And calls him out for assuming that they would be homophobic just because they're black. And, you know, and that's a really interesting moment, on both sides. Of that interaction. But then also, and he doesn't really respond. But also, you know, in the scene that you're talking about with Troy, where, you know, Troy's watching sci-fi, and, you know, that's another sort of stereotype about blackness, you know, not, the most, I don't know, I feel like that's a stereotype, that black people don't like sci-fi. I don't know. Is that not a stereotype? Is that a stereotype?
I don't know if I would say black people don't like sci-fi, but I think it's an anti-stereotype that they do, you know, or maybe I would say it's a stereotype that sci-fi is something white people like. Maybe it's more accurate thing to say.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, there's certainly the stereotype that cool people like Troy are.
That's part. It's not just a race thing. It's about the cool.
Yeah, exactly. For
sure. It's a nerdy thing to do, and it's like seeing the school football jock watching something, doing something, and going, oh, what, you know, and he's like, oh, don't tell anybody, I'm not cool, you know.
Even though he is, like, kind of a nerd in the sense that he's excelling academically.
But he's like super hot.
He's also,
and,
yeah.
He's like definitely.
You reminded me of people we went to high school with. We had cool nerds at our school where you're, and not every school has that kind of thing where you can be, you can excel academically and not lose coolness. You can. Hey, what are you doing Friday night? Studying. And no one's going to call you a loser. But that's, and Justin talked about this in interviews where a lot of what the movie's talking about, and a lot of the issues of race and identity are so spread out because it's really about closed groups of people. Whether it's a college campus, it's high school, it's a humor magazine, it's a frat, it's your family, it's about how information travels in a closed group of people, and that that information warps their view of themselves and people outside of that group. So that's kind of what you get. So if you're in a school like we went to that was about being talented and gifted, then you can't have both be cool and be smart. But because in that closed group that was fine. But if you were in a different situation where being cool meant not studying and it meant, I don't know what other cool people do.
Yeah. Can anyone tell us?
We don't know. That's why we didn't go to those schools.
This is by the way, the point where all your fans are like, these guys were labeled talented and gifted.
Yeah, but to go to show anyone can be labeled that. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's really the nugget to look to the lens, I should say, to look at these situations. It's about how closed groups of people react to people in their group and outside of their group, and that's where you get the blackface party. Because this closed group of people who won't get pressure from someone who's not like them get to within their own group behave a certain way that they wouldn't behave if they had more black friends. It's the same situation of like, I think it was a humorous thing Dear White People had on Facebook about Halloween. It was like, friends don't let friends dress up in blackface. But the idea there is like, listen, you sometimes do need someone who is not like you to tell you things you might not understand. Just like men need women to tell them things that they might do that's offensive to women, and vice versa, and whatever other kind of group you want to talk about. Like, we can't all, our perspectives are limited and confounded by being in closed groups. And it's the same way with like the example with Lionel, thinking a certain thing about the kids at the black, and the sort of black group of kids on campus, and how he imagines that they think based on what, the analogous kids at his school thought, or might have thought, so it's both of like how you look at a closed group and assume things about them, and how that closed group looks at each other and people on the outside, and we see that, if you can expand that out to politics. I mean, that's why politicians get away with what they can get away with, because they live in a closed group where they all pat each other on the back about taking bribes and being sold out to lobbyists and, all these things that is not beneficial if you're not part of that closed group.
I mean, I think that's right, and it speaks to how if you have more diverse communities, both in the literal sense of like a neighborhood and also just a workspace, the people you interact with, if you're in more diverse contexts, these sorts of things start to work themselves out.
Yeah.
And I think you see, to your point, about the friends don't let friends, dress in blackface. I mean, you see this with, like, every so often this will happen. There was the Katy Perry doing yellow face thing where she dressed up in, I don't even know, like a kabuki costume or something like that. I don't remember. And seemingly didn't really understand what was wrong with this. And it's hard for me to understand why, and I don't, like, follow that stuff very closely, so I don't know. Maybe she issued some very thoughtful apology. I don't know, but the fact that it happened, like, I do sort of find it difficult to believe that she or her agent or her stylist or whoever, like, aided in making that event happen would have thought that it was okay if it was blackface.
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
there's not necessarily a big difference here, right? And like what makes it a difference is that we've reached a point where I would say that the majority of Americans recognize / believe that it's wrong to do blackface.
Yeah.
But that a small minority of people who are clearly on Twitter seem to think that it's okay.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, I think there is a difference. I'm not sure if the difference matters. I mean, I think the difference is, 300 years of slavery and 100 years of Jim Crow, and then put blackface on top of that, and that's a completely different situation than, just based on our history, right?
well, I agree, but I mean, there's also like a lot of neocolonialism with Southeast Asia, and
Sure, for sure. Like, that's the thing. I think there's a difference, but I don't think the difference matters.
Right.
No,
there's a difference.
It's the same. And again, I go back to the question of just being like, if I'm my most optimistic, humanistic version of myself, and I say, why can't? And there's the answers to these questions. But why can't because I'm looking at pictures right now. Katy Perry's basic in like an Asian / Oriental outfit, and she's doing a whole thing about it. And her face is basically painted like white. It looks like, and she's got accented eyes and stuff like that. But she's doing the kabuki thing. Why is that bad? Why do we want to live in a world where a performer of one race can't adopt the culture, especially historical culture, of another race? And I think the answer to that is no. And then I think the question is, no, but it should be in a certain context where it's acceptable, in a certain context where it's not acceptable. And I don't have the answers to which context is right or wrong. But that's the question that I find that the movie brought up that I find really interesting is, race is a construct that we created. And I think culture is human culture. And we should all be able to celebrate and delve into various cultures that our people, globally, our people have created. It's not as simple as that because of history and historical issues with race and nationalism and stuff like that. But I feel like that's to me that's an interesting question, and I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where these things are kind of okay. And there's in terms of like blackface, like there's kind of two types of blackface. There's the historical blackface where white performers were doing it for a certain reason, and someone might be doing blackface because they want to portray a black character, but they don't want to hire a black actor. So that's one thing you can just clearly say, okay, that's a situation we don't have to deal with anymore because we can, we don't have sort of the same kind of level of racism in the entertainment industry, so we can have a black actor play that black part. And there was actually a recent story about I forgot what show it was. I don't think it was Scandal. But there was some TV show. Oh, maybe, it was Gotham, I believe. Jada Pinkett Smith is on Gotham. And instead of they needed a stunt double for her. And instead of hiring a black woman to be the stunt double, what they call painted down a white stunt act performer to play the part. And then, of course, there's controversy, and they decided not to do that because they realized that was wrong. And the main reason that's wrong is there's competent black women who can do that. You know what I mean? And it's like they were doing it not to be offensive, but doing it because in this closed group of stunt workers, they hired who they knew. And they knew a white actress who could play the part, and they thought, well, it's just fine. We'll just make her look blacker. You know what I mean? But that, so it's like it's not coming from a level of racism. It's coming because it's a closed group of people who only want to kind of work with the people that they already know, instead of saying, hey, here's a part that a black stunt actress can have. Let's go find one if we don't
Right.
want one. You know what I mean? So there's that level, and then there's the other stuff where it's the blackface parties, and it's just completely usurping culture for your own entertainment, which I don't think there's any real kind of place for that. But again, back to the Katy Perry thing, I think it's really, to me, that's a really interesting question is where is that level of saying, can you be respectful of a culture and its history and use it for a performance?
Well, I think you absolutely can, but in order to do so, you need to go deeper into actually the meaning of the culture and not just use it as a sexy costume and say, you know, I want to look exotic. I want to be on Jezebel tomorrow or whatever. I want people to look at me. I need a new look. And so if you're just doing it to take a new look and or to play off exoticizing, sexualized stereotypes about otherness, then that's not okay. I mean, do I believe that you have a right to do it? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you should. And, you know, the coming back to the film, you know, even if no one was actually doing blackface in terms of actually painting their complexions darker to attend this party, they would still be embodying these harmful stereotypes by, you know, showing up with the grills, with
the chains and the gads.
Right. And I mean and on the one hand, some skeptics might say, well, you know, people choose to wear the grills, to style themselves in this way. Why can't other people do that? Like, that's not actually part of blackness. It's part of this small subculture of people, often people of color, who want to style themselves in this way by buying these things, by dressing in a certain way, that it's not all that different from going to, like, a goth party or a punk party or something. But, I mean, I would argue that, the equating of that style, and you see this when people talk about ratchet, you know, of like equating like a particular style with a particular race or ethnic group. I mean, that's where you see it as a locus of assumptions. And it's not necessarily the act itself of, you know, wearing gold chains or, the watermelon thing is another thing, because that's a reference to, you know, the original blackface vaudeville, which served to basically tell white people that former slaves, you know, romanticized and longed for the days on the plantation. You know, this is where this watermelon thing comes from, at least as far as I understand. I lost my thread. But anyway, the point is that in instances like this, and this is what is so cool about sort of the final reveal of the film, about how this party ends up happening, is that, like, the occasion of this party draws people to come enact their assumptions about what blackness is. It is not a ghetto party, although that in and of itself would have racial, you know, components to it. It's not a ghetto party. It's not a ratchet party. It's not a hip hop party. It's not whatever. It's, you know, come black. And this is how they come. I mean, never mind that they come at all. You know, I mean, that's sort of the big dilemma is, you know, what is the appropriate way to...
That's what Sam brings up in her point when she's accused of sending out the invitation is, like, you...
And in my interpretation, she did send out the invitations. Am I wrong?
I think it's a little ambiguous. I think that's the Occam's razor answer. But I like that it's a bit of a mystery, but I don't think it's... I would say yes.
Okay. Well, I'm at least not crazy to think that she did it, because it seemed like the movie was suggesting that in fact she did, because we had that scene with the president telling Kurt, you know, you gotta shut this party.
So I think it's fairly clear Kurt didn't do it.
Yeah.
He shows up to the party surprised it's happening.
And she overhears that conversation.
Well, and that conversation, and I'm just assuming now that the people listening to this podcast will have already seen the movie.
Yeah, hopefully.
We're spoiling the movie. I mean, too bad. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, but that scene happens right after when she's speaking with the president, and the president says, you know, what I think is that you wish that there were bodies hanging from the trees so that you would have something to protest. And then, you know, and then she overhears this thing about the party. He says he's going to cancel the party. She sees this as as an opportunity to show that, yeah, maybe bodies aren't hanging from trees, but these problems
There's
haven't
still a
gone
problem.
away.
Yeah.
And if the problem has gone away, then when I send out this invitation, no one will come to the party, and people will call this out as something horrible.
Yeah.
But if I'm right,
exactly. She puts his money where his mouth is, so to speak, and says, "Okay, well, let me call your bluff and see what." Yeah. And that was her point of if you should be more concerned that 100 people came to this party, not that everyone on the list didn't say, "What the hell is this? I would never go to this," and boycott it.
Yeah.
Which is so. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say she did it, but I like that she never admits it. The movie doesn't let her admit it.
Yeah, I agree. It's not 100% like revealed, but I feel like there's strong indications that that's the case, and that I mean, but yeah, it's fine that he didn't want to give a definitive answer because that
It makes it an extra mystery you didn't know you were going to get.
Yeah, he did that a couple of times with like surprise reveals where I was like, "That's weird. I wasn't expecting to get surprised."
The hacking thing was interesting.
Yeah, the hacking thing. Yeah. The fact that the election was rigged, I didn't see that coming at all.
Yeah,
and actually it brought up a question for me later. Like I wonder how lopsided it was. Because I feel like if it was sufficiently, like, how many people would have voted for Sam and how many would have voted for Troy, if the election had gone the normal way. Because if it was as lopsided as they suggested it was going to be, then I would expect people would, like, talk to each other and be like, who did you vote for? Like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
But they just kind of go with it. I don't know. It was weird to like reveal that it was rigged. I'm not really sure why they had to do that, actually.
Well, I think it's because Sam wouldn't have won otherwise, and winning. So kind of her journey is will she be this campus leader? Which the first step was being head of house, and how is she gonna, and she kind of sets a new standard when she throws Kurt out and stuff like that. So it was kind of like pushing her towards being a leader. And what's interesting about the movie is, I guess we can talk about Sam here, is her conflict with being, she has dear white people. She is a contrarian. She wants to be a rebel rouser and all that stuff. But at the same time, there's a hesitation there in her quieter moments about what she's really doing and why. And one of the things I think, it's a really weird quality to the structure where you kind of build up. We kind of build up to this rally where I guess the focus is going to be about race on campus, but maybe about this randomized housing act and all that stuff. But so Reggie, who's a guy who likes Sam, he's kind of what they would call the 100%, which is like the militant, more black version of a person, and he is like Sam's right hand man. He wants her to be the campus MLK, Martin Luther King, or I should say Malcolm X. But she doesn't necessarily want to be that, and her journey is figuring out what she wants to be and how she wants to be it. And so what's really interesting structurally wise is we build up to this moment where they're going to have this big rally on campus where she's going to usher in the new era, and it just turns a corner and doesn't happen. Spoiler alert. And I thought that was a really, and it was really kind of her point of no return, where if she was going to go down, there's a fork in the road there, and she had to choose where she was going to go. Is she going to be the person Reggie wants her to be, or, the Sam White, dear white people, extreme version, or is she going to be a more authentic version of herself that we see in other moments when Reggie isn't around? So I just thought that was a really interesting thing where I feel like another lesser film or a different version of the story we would have still had the rally and had that whole sequence, and then after the rally she would have had some revelation about whatever. But it was a really kind of anticlimactic in a good way thing where we build up to this moment that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that her identity journey is one of the big reasons why I feel like this film should have been 3 or 4. I mean, because she's got a lot going on.
Yeah.
And and her relationship with the TA, Gabe, I guess.
Yeah.
And with Reggie, and, you know, her family background, and her, you know, feeling the push and pull of how much she wants to be the mouthpiece for this movement, and how much, you know, there's the line where Gabe calls her out for, you know, her favorite director. I mean, it's a private moment when she's like, when he says, you know, your favorite director is Bergman, but you always say it's Spike Lee. Mm-hmm. You know, like, who is she and what is she going through? You know, I mean, that's like a really rich character, and you just want to see more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and, you know, when he says, you know, how long does it take to get your hair like that, you know, and that's another thing I liked about the movie, is it shows a sort of very specific versions of relationships black people have with their hair, and I think every single character has a specific relationship with their hair. That you never see talked about in movies.
I didn't really think about that as a theme. But
yeah, no, it's huge, and even part of the at the end of the movie is you see these characters facing the screen and dealing with their hair, doing something with it, and of course Lionel starts the movie with this huge afro, and he claims he's growing it out, but it's really a symptom of his internal conflict and his unwillingness to seek help and identity from other people, and how he wants to fit in. You know, he doesn't know what his outside should look like, so he decides to do nothing about it. Whereas, you know, as we know, Troy cuts hair. That's one of the things he does, and it's like, well, you could have come to me, but it's like he didn't think he could connect to him on that level, or that he would say yes to something like that. You know, he thought Troy was too cool for that. And then you see Troy, who has the very short hair with the waves. He wears the wave cap and everything, and you see. One of the things I actually like that I know the director and the writer, because I want to ask Justin this, because I don't know how purposeful this was, but you see at the end of the film when all the four characters are kind of dealing with their hair and kind of it's sort of a catharsis or whatever, but you see Troy like take the wave cap off, and then he starts brushing his hair a little bit. And to me, as a person who I wear my hair like that from time to time, one of the things you don't do, just as a lesson to white people, you're gonna learn something here.
You're white people, yeah.
Yeah, you don't brush out your waves, right? So when you take your wave cap off, your hair is slicked down, is perfect. Like you might like brush certain like the edges or something, but you wouldn't actually put the brush to the main part of your hair, because what it will do is it disrupts the slick down quality of the it'll make it fuzzier, it makes it it displaces the hair,
Mm-hmm.
So
I had no idea that was what a wave cap did.
Yeah, so that's
it makes sense. But
I knew that's what it did, but I never thought about you shouldn't brush out.
Yeah, so basically if you brush it, it takes away that very slick look that you were trying to get. And so this is like I don't know how far I'm reaching into this, but I really want to know, I really want to know if the point I really want to know if the point of Troy brushing the waves was to say he doesn't want to look too perfect. You know what I mean? He wants to have perfection. He wants to look a certain way, but he doesn't want to look too perfect.
I had no idea there was a mystery there.
Oh man, yeah, that went right over my head.
Yeah, no, but it's just, to me, I've done that. I am Troy in that, you don't brush out your waves. So I'm like, why did he decide to do? And I don't know if it's just a visual thing of they wanted him to have some sort of action, just to do something, and he doesn't, he didn't really fully brush it out. It would have been fine, but it was, to me, it caught my eye of why is he touching it up with the brush? I mean, you to a degree you can do that. It's not like anathema, right?
Yeah.
But just generally speaking, it would have been more perfect to not. And so I don't know, maybe I'll learn something about black hair I didn't know. Maybe Justin will be like, no man, you don't brush out your waves.
You gotta brush it.
But anyway,
what are you talking about?
Yeah, but no, I thought that was a very, for non-black people, that's a look into a particular part of black culture, is the relationship with hair, which the movie really talks about. And how that's wrapped up in your identity and your sense of self. So with Sam, she wraps her hair up and wears it in a very nice way, but it's hiding the texture of her hair and the length of her hair so she can fit into certain groups she wants to fit in with. And so that, that's what Gabe points out, is like you spending all this time hiding this authentic, natural version of yourself for a certain reason, and that's literally what happens by the end of the film, is she lets her hair down, and she wears it just the way it is naturally, and she is her more authentic self because of that. So I thought that was another kind of aspect of the movie that, a less astute writer-director would have not even touched upon.
Yeah. The hair theme is a really interesting one.
Yeah. I didn't really put my finger on that as being like a central thing that all the characters deal with. But yeah, as soon as you pointed that out, it kind of, if I saw the movie again, I would pay more attention to that.
Yeah.
It sort of makes me cringe because I remember being a kid and asking my black friends, like, if I could touch their hair.
Yeah.
And like,
that's a big thing in the movie.
And like, how often did they wash it? And like, I mean, it just goes to show like how fascinated people are by difference.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? And that's why it's such a loaded thing. And then there's all this, the intra conflicts of people who, different black people have different types of hair. So if your hair is quote unquote good hair, you might get flack for that, or you perceive to be a certain way for that. So there's all these other things, not even, just within that part of race, let alone other people being interested. But to me, that's what's really interesting, is you should be able to ask those questions. I mean, there should be nothing wrong with being interested in the differences, as long as it comes from an honest place of learning and being interested.
Right.
I've had, a friend of mine who has a white guy who has very, very curly hair has had people want to touch his hair. So it's not just a race thing. It's a difference thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think that by the time you're in college, you shouldn't be touching people. Yeah. I mean, you should have gotten over this by now.
Touch it when you're young, people.
Yeah. Right.
Though I will say that Lionel's hair is quite spectacular for a big portion of the movie. So
it is really something.
I mean, not that I would like actually ask if I could touch it, but I mean, it is like it commands a room. I mean, it's really, it's on the posters. Like it's quite striking.
Yeah.
So, and I was gonna say about Lionel, like, at least for me watching the movie initially, I found his character to be, as the, he's the outcast of everyone. He has no group to be a part of. He was the easiest character to sympathize with.
Yeah,
I think.
For
sure. All the other characters had elements where it's like, I don't quite know what to think of them. Like, I'm not really sure, where this is, what this character's deal is or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I think everyone can identify with being a Lionel. Everyone can identify with not everyone. Most people can identify with not understanding which group they fit into for various reasons. And that's one of the reasons I liked his character, because I felt like that at SMU, an all-white school, figuring out, okay, well, do I go to the Black Student Union and hang out with those people? I've been in that situation of like, who do I, so it's like, do I pledge the black fraternity? Do I pledge the white fraternity? Do I pledge any fraternity? I ended up pledging the engineering fraternity.
I know.
This is what I can, this is a group I can identify with, where it's not based on race or culture.
Right.
It's based on, we like engineering.
Love for engineering.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a very, very not hot button topic. So it was easy to, I didn't have to confront anything about myself in order to deal with that group. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting situation with Lionel, and I love that little sequence where he's kind of sitting by himself, not having a group, and then he has a little vision of himself dealing with the black kids and looking more black, and then dealing with the gay kids and looking more gay, and like that whole idea of which group should he go towards.
Yeah.
That got laughter.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. Yeah, and like he's got this little story where this guy comes from, like, so he writes Oh man, there's so much shit going on in this movie. I swear, it's like, my brain, I'm like, can I even keep this straight? Having seen it once. Okay. He writes for, like, some small independent, more independent than, like, this other thing is still a college newspaper, I think, but this is, like, more small than that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's
Help me out.
like the campus newspaper.
Okay, he writes for the campus newspaper, or is it the other guy? He writes for an independent newspaper that's published on campus, and then this other guy comes to recruit him for the campus newspaper, or is the other guy for some other? Do you know what the story is?
So the gay guy who recruits Lionel,
Yeah,
I think, is just the editor of the campus newspaper.
he's the editor of the campus newspaper. Okay, but Lionel was previously writing for another paper, a smaller one. Like the independent something
that, like,
or
nobody
other
reads.
that they would say like nobody reads.
I thought that was like his high school paper or something.
That was his high school paper, but wasn't
I
he
don't-
still writing for it even at the end? Like, isn't that a thing?
No.
Don't they show his story at the end, like on the cover of the independent blah blah blah, like he goes back to it? Like I thought that was a thing at the end of the movie.
I think.
Am I crazy?
I thought that was just the campus newspaper.
No, I thought it said the independent, like he didn't write for the campus newspaper. He ended up going back to the place where he was writing before.
Oh, I didn't catch that. I didn't catch that there were two campus newspapers.
Yeah, I think there were two. Okay, maybe I'm crazy. I thought there were two papers, and there was.
I also thought that, but I don't know. Maybe we'll have to follow up on that.
Yeah, okay, because I thought the reveal at the end, because I mean he has this whole experience where this guy comes to recruit him. He claims that he read one of his articles in the other thing, and he recruits him to write about what is he supposed to write about exactly?
Sam.
He's writing about Sam specifically,
Yeah.
Or is he writing about okay? So he's gonna write about Sam, and they have this strange like pseudo flirtatious relationship where like. It's not really clear why he's recruiting him. It's not really clear, like, what's going on in their dynamics. And, I mean, eventually, like, Lionel's pushed into these situations for doing this reporting that, leads him down his, like, character path.
Yeah.
But I feel like eventually at the end of the movie, he rejects the guy and doesn't, he joins the Black Student Union and he goes to shut down the party, and I think he goes back to write for the other paper, and that's what he writes his article for.
Okay.
That was my impression.
That makes sense. That makes sense that there's two. Yeah, okay.
I think so. So this is something where I probably need to watch it again to fully understand. But yeah, I mean, his character was very relatable, and I would say, and this is where I have to bring it up because I see.
Oh yeah. He was writing for the alternative campus newspaper, and he had a chance at the main, more prestigious one. Okay.
Excellent. Yes. So see, it's like there's a lot going on here. So it's like there's two papers, and it's like, wow, it's enough. Anyway, it's like there could have been like a second humor magazine, and it's just like, oh my god. Like, okay. So, like, I watch movies, and I've seen a fair amount of movies. I don't watch that many these days, but, like, I have seen a lot of them in general, and I compare movies to other movies, and this is just something I can't help but do.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I said, I totally compare, the structure of this movie is very Altman-esque. I think here with Lionel, I really saw, even though in a way he's a mirror image, but I saw something similar to Spike Lee's character in Do the Right Thing, where he's not an outcast. It's actually the opposite. He gets along with everybody.
Yeah.
But in a way, because he gets along with everybody, he also doesn't belong with any one group.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a similar dynamic that he has, where he's like, either he doesn't belong to any side or he belongs to all sides, but in any case, he hasn't picked a side.
Yeah.
And so he's like straddling that line, and he's the, character it's really easy to latch onto, because at least as an audience member, maybe you don't know how you're supposed to fall or which side you want to pick right in, and it's easy to identify with a character like that,
Yeah.
And his arc in the movie, going from, someone who just has no identity at all, doesn't really want to think about, issues and like what, racial issues and like his sexuality, all this stuff like is pushed to the back. And by the end of the movie, he's like breaking bottles and pushing stuff off the table and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm seeing Spike Lee throwing the trash can through the window and Do the Right Thing.
There's something about this built up hostility that the character doesn't even know is there.
Yeah.
Until they have a moment to express it physically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they have this weird, like, they both, and I think similarly, like, have this moment of clarity where, because in Do the Right Thing, like, he goes off and he sees what happens and, there's like a minute where he thinks about it and then he just walks over and grabs the thing. And it's kind of similar with him at the party where he's just like, what the fuck? Of course, in his case, he like goes off, gets other people, then comes back.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit, it takes a longer time for that whole thing to play out. But I definitely saw that, influence there. And Do the Right Thing I really love that movie.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to have that structure, but I wished on another level, I wished I wasn't being reminded of that movie because, then I start comparing it and then I'm thinking, well, this guy's not as good as John Turturro or, Danny Aiello, like some of the characters. I mean, Do the Right Thing was Spike Lee's third movie.
Yeah, exactly.
It was much higher budget than this one, I believe. Although I don't exactly know. Do you know what the budget of this movie was?
I think it was like $200 million.
Okay. What? I believed you,
it was
and then
all
I was like,
CGI.
oh my gosh.
The trick was they hired all white actors,
Holy
but then they had to darken them in post-production.
Yeah, that whole campus was all CG, man. Yeah. Dennis Haysbert is just a CG character.
But a CG Dennis Haysbert is actually cheaper than the real deal. Which is even cheaper than Forrest Whitaker.
Oh God.
No, the budget, let me see if I can find it really quickly. It looks like, this isn't telling me. No, I don't know off the top of my head. I don't see.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but it's really just that, like, I think Spike Lee's first movie was, and like, the tone and the sensibility and so on, like, there's a big difference between what he's doing here and what Spike Lee did, but they do have some overlap,
Yeah.
and it's hard not to compare them to some extent.
Yeah.
At least for me. And, like, Spike Lee's first movie was She's Gotta Have It. It's nothing like this.
Yeah.
Spike Lee didn't get to Do the Right Thing until later.
Mm-hmm.
He's coming right off the bat trying to do this very ambitious, very, usually the first movie is a much more stripped down kind of thing. That's what I was saying at the beginning.
Yeah.
And, like, you work up to the super ambitious, like, Reservoir Dogs first.
Yeah.
Not
then Pulp Fiction.
first.
Yeah, or Christopher Nolan, you do Following, then
Yes.
you do Memento.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go do Memento first. Like, It was just weird. And so I feel like he somehow did the crazier movie first, and he never did the simpler, stripped down, basic movie to, like, as a warm-up exercise. He just came out of the gate with, like, really, ambitious, fully realized, like, ideas running together.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyway, like, it took away a little of the sequence for me because I was just comparing it to the Do the Right Thing sequence, which I think it's more visceral. I mean, in Do the Right Thing, they, like, crash in the windows and, like, burn the place down. Like, it's just so much more dramatic. than what happens in the movie, where it's just like it breaks a few bottles and like knocks over some turntables and then like kisses the guy in the front lawn, but it's like
Yeah, but then he gets the shit kicked out of him.
yeah, and the guy beats him up, you know. But like, I mean, in Do the Right Thing, there's a death, you know, like the cops are involved, like there's a whole like extra.
Do the Right Thing is way grittier. It's it's not as heightened, I don't think.
That's true, definitely. But I think it is a little bit heightened from reality. There is something there, but it is definitely a lot more like down to earth and like in your face.
Yeah.
And like let's have some like for real violence and stuff like that. You know, I think this movie doesn't want to quite go there. Like like hardcore violence. I mean, that's just a bit much. You know, but like that moment was so powerful in Do the Right Thing. Echoing that, but in a sort of tamer version, was a little bit. I don't know. It took away from it a little for me. Just that comparison, which isn't really fair, but that's what's going through my head.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, you know, and it's also the 20-something-year-olds who are watching this movie might not have seen Do the Right Thing.
That's true. It's a very old movie at this point.
That's part of it too. Is I mean, and I think this film has a very wide. I mean, I think everyone can get something out of this movie, which is in itself a rare feat. I think no matter what your kind of age or background is, there's something here you haven't seen before, which is pretty cool to be able to do. But I think I think it's fair to compare. You know, it's in the same territory.
The reason that I think I mean, I agree that it's fair. It's, in a sense, it's fair to make the comparison. But the reason that I am reluctant to make the comparison is just because Do the Right Thing is not, I mean, I mean, most films come up short if you compare them to Do the Right Thing. Like, that's in my opinion, a very high standard.
Yeah, but in a way that's a compliment. Like, I'm holding this movie up to a standard like that. Like, I'm evaluating it on the level of like, Do the Right Thing is one of my favorite movies ever. So, you know, if it's not quite up to that, that's not really so much of an insult. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. It has to be put in context. I mean, for a first movie, if I compare this to She's Gotta Have It, I think it would probably come out quite impressive, relatively speaking. I mean, that's just a much smaller, simpler, just kind of, you know, basic rom-com-y kind of movie.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing bad about it, but it's certainly nowhere near the level of sophistication that's going on in this movie.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah. But, so, I mean, in a way, I think I'm harsher on movies the better they are.
Yeah. Yeah, if it has to be good to be worthy of criticism, I think, in a way. Otherwise you say, oh, that was bad, what's next?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, that was okay. Like, it did its job.
That's the thing you can say about something, right? Any art, that's okay.
Yeah.
That means it doesn't move you at all. You should either hate it or love it. If it didn't affect you, then yikes, what was the point?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, that was adequate. I don't know. Like, I really feel like...
Perfectly adequate.
Perfectly adequate. One thumb to the side.
I really see potential here. Like, I'm excited for the next movie he makes, if he can make another movie. I mean, I know he funded this with Indiegogo and took it to festivals and eventually got picked up by a studio. And so, like, this wasn't, you know, I mean, Do the Right Thing was funded by a studio from the start.
Yeah.
And the studios were different back then.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they funded, I mean, even in the 80s it was worse than the 70s, but, like, studios have really drawn back, they pulled back on, like, funding smaller movies like this.
Yeah. They would much rather fund a $200 million movie than a $2 million movie.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, it's harder to get movies like this made, which is unfortunate to me, because, like, this is, like, what I would want to see more. I would go to the movies more if more movies like this were out there.
Yeah.
You know, this is, you know, really what I'm looking for. But so I hope, like, I hope this is successful. I hope he can like make another movie.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, and I also hope that it illustrates that. I mean, it's doing pretty well at the box office. I mean, all things considered, you know, and it's. I don't know. I just hope that it illustrates that there is an audience for an intelligent film that deals with complicated issues, like in and of itself, just that in and of itself, but also that there's an audience for complicated, realistic portrayals of black characters that are not about like, you know, just recreating stereotypes for mass entertainment, you know?
Yeah. No, it's a very old. The movie definitely has an old school sensibility. I think of just like, here's some people.
Yeah, and he's went to film school. Like, it's clear from the references in the movie that he knows film in general.
Yeah.
It comes across that he's got that, you know, old school aesthetic as far as like. The film is paced very deliberately as well. Like, that was really striking to me. Yeah. I was expecting it to be a lot more like rapid fire, and that was partially based on the website, you know, and a lot more jokes and stuff like that. But actually, it's very, you know, I really enjoyed it. Like, I mean, I was sucked into that whole thing, and it really just makes me think like there's. I see like huge potential here, and definitely like a TV show would be very interesting.
Yeah.
I think that would be a great.
I think a TV show is the perfect place for this.
Yeah, because like these days, like TV really is the place where people do get funding to do interesting things. Yeah. And that would be, you know, a great opportunity to explore a lot of the characters in more depth and like fill in some of those things that, you know, they didn't really have time for in the 108 minutes of this movie. 108 minutes, wow. Anyway.
Lost.
Yeah, of course.
Can't get away from it.
No, it's always there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what. Yeah, I think it's doing fairly well in the box office for the release it has. I guess, yeah, I'm curious to know what level it needs to before somebody says, okay, we need to make more of this, or before it's used an example to greenlight other types of films like this. But yeah, I think Hollywood has always, more recently, just been reluctant to have any sort of movies with any intellectual themes in it. And I guess TV is just a place for that these days. But yeah, it's nice to not have, you know, to see a movie that's not explosions and aliens, that actually has real people dealing with real issues. That's not preachy, and it's not condescending, and it's doesn't try to have all the answers. And yeah, it's I can't think of I mean. Yeah, and even like going back to Juno, like a movie like that again, like what was interesting about that was the style, but to me the subject matter wasn't interesting. You know, yeah. So I think here you have the subject matter is interesting, the style is interesting, the vision is very specific. That's a lot to get right, I think, in any movie. I've seen worse movies from some of my favorite directors. You know, you know, and that I would never watch again. But yeah, even seeing this a second time, it was still just as entertaining.
Just to defend Juno a little bit, I actually did think that the subject matter was interesting. I just thought that it tried to be a little too cute. Mm-hmm. And that was my beef with Juno. But I mean, I thought that it had some legitimately funny moments. It had some legitimate tender moments. And like, I don't know, Diablo Cody is just a very different sort of storyteller. And I think you see that with, I never saw Jennifer's Body, but I mean, you see, she went a pretty different route.
Yeah, I prefer Jennifer's Body to Juno. But the subject matter is important to how much you're going to like something. So
Yeah.
that the kind of horror story thing that's going on there, I thought was way more interesting. I'm a huge fan of her for United States of Terror. That was a great TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Really a lot of cool stuff going on there. I think I saw Young Adult, but as you can tell from how I'm saying this, that's what I thought of it. But yeah, so I mean, part of it is what the subject matter is how much are you interested in it, and then the execution matters too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, just in defense of Juno.
Someone
I thought it was hugely overrated.
Yeah, that was my main problem with it. It wasn't a horrible movie.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's horrible, but just in terms of like the quote unquote someone's first movie thing, and
right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of other big first movies that got that kind of acclaim in recent years, and I'm stuck. I can't really think of other versions like that. That's the one that sticks in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, I'm going back to Reservoir Dogs. I mean, is that too old? Like, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, what's in like the last 10 or 20 years?
Yeah. I don't know. Who are some who even exists anymore? God, I'm so
what an essential question.
I'm so out of touch. Because I feel like the so-called like auteurs who make interesting movies for the studios, like the ones I'm thinking of. I mean, they're all they made their mark a while ago.
Yeah,
and they're still just riding on that. Basically, I mean, they continue to make movies that make money, but they have their clout because of what they did a while ago.
So I'm looking at an article, 10 greatest films by first-time directors. So one that comes to mind that I would pretty much agree with was that movie Attack the Block, that sci-fi action movie from Joe Cornish was pretty well done. I wouldn't put it in the same quality as Dear White People or Juno, really, because it's an action movie. But it was very good. But then every other movie here, of course, Reservoir Dogs is here, but every other movie here is old. It's like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Night of the Living Dead, Steven Spielberg's Duel. Donnie Darko was the more recent one. And Citizen Kane, but Orson Welles doesn't count.
Citizen Kane!
Wow.
Yeah, that's a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a lot of experience with a lot of stuff before.
Steve McQueen doing Hunger, I did not see that movie, but I know he's done a lot of highly acclaimed films. But
I actually haven't seen any of his movies.
Yeah, I haven't either. He's the most acclaimed director whose movies I haven't seen.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Not one. Haven't seen any of them.
You didn't see 12 Years a Slave?
No.
Yeah,
I haven't seen any of his movies.
I didn't see Shame. I meant to.
I saw Shame. It's really upsetting. It's a really upsetting film.
Yeah, I mean, they looked like they were going to be really unpleasant, and
that's like his thing. Seems to like really unpleasant subject matter.
Yeah, exactly. No, I feel like I should see some of his movies at some point. He's like a modern day like art director, but I just have not seen it.
Yeah,
I've not seen Hunger.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of those movies. But yeah, when you said Steve McQueen, every time I hear that, I still think the actor.
Yeah, it's a tough name to have, I think. And I guess and I guess because he's not an actor, he didn't have to change the name or think differently. So but it's interesting that it's like Steve McQueen. It's like can I be Orson Welles the director?
Yeah,
I don't know, like. I'll ride that name. Orson Welles is back directing, guys. Come see his latest film, Escape from Outer Space.
Guess who's back? Nobody saw this coming.
Yeah. I feel like if someone could come back from the dead, it'd be Orson Welles.
Sure.
He would be really, grandiose about it. Did you believe that death could keep me captive?
Oh my god, that's so ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah, he could will himself back from the grave if anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alright, anything else about the movie? Did we cover all the big things?
I was gonna say, I feel like it ties into her, like, identity and, like, the whole speech she has at the end, but the whole subplot with, like, Sam's, like, father being in the hospital or whatever, like,
Yeah.
I felt like that was a little underwhelming, like, they set it up early, and I was like, ooh, where's that going? And it just goes to the obvious place. I mean, I thought that was sort of a weird, I mean, it leads somewhere, but I don't know.
That's mostly, I agree. I think what I get out of that really is paid off with her ending speech, because it really is the time where she explains a lot of her issues with her identity and sense of self. Is she basically reveals that she has a white father.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about walking and holding his hand and how people perceive their relationship and, and their connection to each other, and how that related to her dating the white guy, and what does it mean for her to walk and hold this white guy's hand, and her running away from that, and so that really, I feel like that was really just to set that up. It gave her something to be upset about when she needed to be conflicted with some extra life things that just happens,
Mm-hmm.
So she could get a phone call from her mom and have to deal with that, and I kind of like that not that I wouldn't have wanted more for it to matter more, but in terms of the details, I kind of like that we didn't hear the mom's side of the conversation. We didn't really know what the dad was going through. I like that it was just kind of like amorphous problem, amorphous life issue that imposes itself upon you at bad times, because that's what happens in life. But yeah, really, it just comes back to, I think if she didn't have that ending speech, it would have been way more flat. But you realize that she's been dealing with her father. She's been dealing with, her issues as a character are wrapped up in her issues with her father. She's dealing with issues with her father medically throughout the film, and then that kind of comes full circle to her dealing with Gabe, So it works in that kind of structural way. But yeah, it was very light on its impact on the story.
Yeah. Another thing is, I would like to, and this isn't exactly my thing, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I would like to have known, the impact of Dear White People, the radio program, on campus.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it wasn't really woven into the story very clearly. I don't know. And, Do the Right Thing is also framed by, a radio program.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more of a sense of, the characters listening to it and, how it... Whereas, in the movie, it wasn't clear, who's listening to this and, how widely known is it? To what extent does it impact? You know what I mean? I sort of wanted a little more of a sense of what its role was on campus.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you got people who were reacting to it, but you didn't get the sense of who the audience was, and people talked about it. But yeah, you didn't really see, the black kids listening to it and agreeing or disagreeing, or the white kids listening to it and agreeing or disagreeing. You did, but you'd had people comment about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I don't know. It's not such a big deal, but because, that was in a way the outward representation of that side of her personality and, that aspect of her character, I would have liked that to be a little more incorporated or developed in the story. It kind of feels very fringy, especially because it's the title of the movie. I expected it to play a bigger role in the movie than it did, but actually, in a way, it doesn't matter at all. Except for what it makes her character.
Mm-hmm.
What her character represents because she does that show. But you could kind of just take it out and this movie would still be the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's more of a launching point for the story than anything else.
Yeah. So that was That was surprising.
Mm-hmm.
That was not what I was expecting. Let me think. Okay, I think that's the end of my issues.
Yeah. I think in a sense, I feel like we only really scratched the surface, but also it's been, 2.5 hours, and, there's just a lot there. So I look forward to seeing what's going to, what the next conversation will be.
Yeah. Was there, what, do you guys have any, like, your favorite moment, or a learning moment, or a shocking moment, or a line that was like, wow, I can't believe somebody said that, or anything like that?
For me, it was Coco's line at the end that I don't remember. Does that count?
Was it the nobody wants a motherfucking Harriet Tubman? That whole speech. Nobody gives.
Yes.
Harriet
I think
Tubman.
that's it. Yeah.
And
that little thing when she's on camera in the place, that was my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great moment. That might be mine too.
Yeah, I think that there were plenty
of others, but that was one that really took me by surprise.
Yeah.
And in general, that was what her character did for me. Like every time she was on screen, I was like, what? Like I just kept like not expecting what was happening. And so that's why like I found her character so interesting.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think that was the standout, but she had a lot of good scenes. And actually, the other characters had a lot of good scenes too. I liked a lot of the scenes. But anyway, you have to pick one. I picked that.
Okay.
I guess if I want to pick two.
Cheater.
And I know, right? One was from the very beginning when I think that it's Kurt calls into Dear White People and asks, how would you feel if there were Dear Black People?
Mm-hmm.
And her response was, no need. The mainstream media tells us every day what white people think of us.
Yeah.
So that was one of them. And then the other one was her reaction to the implied accusation that she was the one who sent out the invitation. When she says,
"Oh yeah, that was really good."
When she says something about how the invitation should have been, how people should have reacted to the invitation.
Yeah. No, that's a great moment too.
So, yeah, and you?
I think both when Coco comes to the party at the end and she's like, let's investigate this, Mm-hmm. Why do white people do this? Why do black people do that? Let's investigate. I thought that was an interesting way to look at what was going on. And then her response at the end of that sequence, which I can't remember the exact line either.
Yeah, I know. It's like the greatest speech no one can remember.
Yeah. It's like something about Rosebud, I think. Rosebush? Yeah,
damn you, Orson Welles.
I'm already damned. Yeah, I think that was another great part. I'm trying to think what else. I liked a lot of the little quieter moments with the characters. I think the Coco and Troy scene after they sleep together was an awesome moment. Where you see these people connect, that was really interesting.
Yeah. Sorry.
I was gonna say, I love when we know Troy smokes pot, and then Coco says, "Do you smoke?" and he says, "No." I love that. I love even being unguarded in this situation. He still has his guard up. A little bit longer until he does eventually give in, but he never admits it. It's still this like thing where he's still not going to just say, "Oh yeah, I do." Like he's going to not be the Troy people expect him to be, as long as he can hold out.
Yeah, after their conversation about how Calandria doesn't pass the resume test.
Oh yeah.
Then in the end, when she says she just wants people to know her name, and Troy says which one, that I think is a really fantastic line.
Yeah, those are those lines. There's so many lines like that where somebody says something, and then somebody responds, and you go, your brain explodes. And you're like, oh. Yeah. Like, there's no answer, you know? Like, they're not in the position to answer the questions, you know? Because it's realistic that way.
Yeah. I don't know what exactly the answer to that is. Yeah. Or if she really knows what the answer to that is.
Mm-hmm. And does it matter?
Yeah.
Does it matter which name they know you by? Is your identity your name?
Yeah. I mean, plenty of famous people change their names for a wide variety of reasons, and they're known by some name that isn't the name they were born with.
Yeah.
And, you know, that can be as simple as it's the way it sounds. Like, it's just kind of cumbersome to say, and so they change it to something easier to say. And it doesn't have that connotation. Or it can be because they want to hide their ethnic origin. There's all sorts of reasons. You know? And, like, is it automatically bad, or is it just part of show business, or I don't know.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
It is.
So what was the makeup of the theater when you guys saw it?
I don't know, there were maybe 15
10,
people.
15, yeah.
And I think we were the only white people.
Really?
I think so. When we came in, I think we were the only white people.
Okay.
We may not have remained the only white people. But,
yeah, that might be true.
But then when we were, you know, at the end of the evening, it was like 10:30, and we'd seen it in this mall, and so we were sort of moseying out kind of slowly. And as we left and walked out into the parking garage, this black couple, maybe in their late 30s or something, or I don't know, maybe mid 30s, asked us.
Yeah.
The woman just turned to us and asked us, like, did you like that movie? And because I guess she had not liked it, but her husband or her boyfriend or whoever the guy that she'd gone with really liked it.
Yeah, he liked it, but she was like, I didn't like it, and
Interesting.
It was like cold and late, and we didn't get to really find out
why.
I
mean, we didn't have like a long conversation, and my head was still spinning. You know, like when I walk out of a movie, like it takes me a minute to process and like think about it and like come to terms with it, and you know, really like iron out my opinion about it. And so at that point, I was like, yeah, I liked it, but like it was harder for me to really elaborate.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of said, I think I just said, yeah, I liked how intelligent it was, but it wasn't as funny as I expected it to be. And I told them about how on the website there are those little videos that are really funny.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was it. But,
yeah.
But yeah, I really, in hindsight, wished that I had asked why she hadn't liked it.
Yeah. Are white people not seeing the movie? Like, is that a thing?
No, they are.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean,
when I saw it, there was a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think, I mean, there just weren't that many people in the theater, and there's a lot of black people in Columbus.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm interested when people, you know, don't like something, and it's, and you know, you want to find out why, and sometimes I think the reason is it makes them uncomfortable. You know, so one of the early reviews I saw, like the New York Times had written about this movie and reviewed it, and I was looking at the comments, and some person said, "Oh, the movie's anti-white." And to me, what that says is the movie made you uncomfortable because it told you things you didn't want to think about. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing if you're uncomfortable. That means that you're confronting ideas that you don't normally think about, you know, because there's really no way you can say the movie's anti-white.
Well, it makes me wonder if that person actually saw the movie.
Yeah, I've seen some of that on the IMDb thing for the movie, like some of the user reviews. Like, it seems like there's a knee-jerk reaction, just like based on the title.
Yeah.
and like some vague sense of what the movie is, and like they're just ready to react.
But again, it goes back to that idea of reverse racism. This idea of when you have a system of power, it's like the people at the bottom can't throw stones at the people at the top because the power system says nope, you can't do that. It's against the law. You can't say we're doing anything bad, and it's that thing of like, you see that a lot, and you see that whole idea of, okay, if black people want to talk about what it's like to be black, and that bumps up against what racism and prejudice and those things, then automatically this conversation is null and void. And I think you see that theme a lot, and that is what racism is. That's exactly what it means. It's like a form of despotism, of saying you can't deride the leader. You can't call out the inequities of the system by virtues of the system itself. So when I see somebody go, oh, this movie's anti-white, that means that you shut down the conversation right there. That you don't explore what the movie's talking about, or what the themes are talking about, or what people's experiences are. You just shut it down right there because it's uncomfortable for you to deal with what the realities might actually be. And so it's such a frustrating response. It's understandable to a degree. But again, it goes back to privilege. You have the privilege to say, nope, that's racist against white people. Affirmative action, that's racist against white people. It shouldn't happen. Just to stop it now. And it's like, well, okay, let's look at this in a larger context and see if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that anybody who's going to post that sort of thing is never really going to watch the film, because they're not going to want to give their money to that. They're not going to want to be seen going into the theater seeing it. They're not going to want, and quite obviously, they're not going to want to open their minds up to seeing portrayals of other people's experiences that might make them uncomfortable. Those people are just you're never going to win them over.
No. Because
they're just too closed-minded. People like that could move a bit in their beliefs, but not much.
Yeah.
And, but, I think it's like with gay rights, you can have people who are on that end of the spectrum. They're on that end of the issue. But if you can move enough of the rest of the people, those people will look more and more isolated all the time. Mm-hmm. And their ideas will become more and more fringe. And
I actually think this movie is like pretty gentle in a way. I mean, it's not like, it could be far more confrontational than it is.
Yeah.
It's very introspective, and like, it's not, I don't know. I mean, it's not the movie people think it is.
And I think the title is confrontational.
Yeah.
But it's on purpose. Partly because Justin has a background in PR and marketing, and he knows that we're going to talk about a film called Dear White People and not, Winchester University, or whatever else you could call this movie. Incident on and off a college campus or something.
It's an awesome title.
A little long, but it's great. And I think that's, so I think there are people who walk into the movie, or that are, think about the movie they start with their arms folded and in a defensive position, because it's like, oh, here's a movie that's gonna, tell me about myself. Okay, yeah, right, here it comes. But it's funny because it's like, even if that's what the movie was, which it isn't, we can't have one.
Right. Yeah, no, totally.
Couldn't you just have one that's like that?
Yeah,
that's what I mean. Like, it's that idea that you can't have anything that's going against what the system wants to happen. There just can't be any tolerance of that. And
I think that's why people people shit on Spike Lee so much. I mean, the people you hear denigrating Spike Lee, they don't see his movies.
Yeah.
I mean, they maybe see his sound bites from interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'm sure that was true. Yeah, back then as well. I mean, but yeah. On the other hand, like there should be room for like just the blind rage movie. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't see why that shouldn't.
it's really the least we
Exist.
could do to allow you to have at least
No,
one
not
blind rage.
allow. I mean,
Oh, I know.
I.
I'm just kidding. No, but I mean, yeah, I think what's particularly striking about this movie, and in terms of this like argument that it's anti-white, is like I mean, to use the television network jargon, it's ripped from the headlines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's nothing that is portrayed in this movie that has to do directly with white people that isn't something that has happened over and over and over.
Yeah.
I mean, and most of the movie is not any more about whiteness than it is about blackness.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, certainly you can't talk about one without the other, and you certainly can't talk about a marginalized group without talking about the dominant group. But, because the marginalization becomes part of the identity, and the marginalization exists because of the dominance. But, I mean, a lot of the movie is about black people interacting with black people about blackness.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be easily called Dear Black People.
Yeah.
Or Dear People,
Dear America.
Dear America. Yeah.
But, anyway.
Awesome.
I also wanted to see more of her show, of her radio show.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted more of that.
Yeah, what does she do? Does she, like, play music and then just, like, in between go, like, Dear White People, blah, 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 and then play another song? Or does she talk does she have guests? Like, those are questions I had. That was part of, like, wanting to know more about the show.
Yeah. It did seem like she was a DJ, but I don't think that was the idea. I think it was more talk radio because she had people call in, so maybe she had like a topic of the day or something.
Yeah.
But it seemed like it would have been a short show. But yeah, I agree. More of that. I mean, that's what you would get in the TV show. She would be doing that more.
Yeah. I would really like to see the TV show version.
I would love a Netflix show, like a limited number of episodes, but like not like network TV like standard practices. I want like no holds barred, do whatever you want, but like something that has an original voice to it, and there's some cable channels that it could work on, but I think Netflix would be a really cool place to have it and just get it all at once. 13 episodes or something, and a season.
13 episodes, bam.
Boom. 13 episodes, one night.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's better than Arrested Development was.
Yeah. All right. I think that wraps up our little podcast review of Dear White People. Fun conversation, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
absolutely.
Excellent.
Well, I know I'm a little less racist after this conversation, so I think we can all safely say
problem solved.
We did it.
We ended racism, guys.
Who thought it was going to be here?
Everyone. All right. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
All right. See you later.